Okay, I'd like to call to order the Conservation Advisory Council for the town of Niskayuna. This is the April 3rd, 2023 meeting. So why don't we start the meeting with a roll call?
Okay, I have Ellen Daviero, Vicky Michaela, Ashok Ramasubramanian, Simran Uterker, and Chelsea Ratner is joining us online. Miss Bonton Murray is excused, and Mickey Vaisohalid is going to be joining us a little late.
Great. Okay.
And I don't know where Steve is.
Okay, we have minutes for March 1st, 2023. Does anybody have any comments on those minutes? Any corrections? No.
Brought to us by Jack, our intern.
Okay.
Yeah, he does do a good job.
In that case, I would entertain a motion to accept the minutes as written. Does somebody want to second it?
I second it.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any
Aye.
nays? Okay, the motion carries. The minutes are adopted. Okay, I'd like to open the floor, privilege of the floor. So if anybody would like to approach the podium and speak, feel free to just provide your name and address.
Good evening.
Evening.
I'm Josh Spain. I live at 1219 Ruffner Road, and I'm here to comment on the Mohawk Club development proposal. I didn't have anything prepared. I didn't submit a letter, but I did just want to make sure that, number one, I clearly state that I'm opposed to this development in total, opposed to any entry or egress or any new roads on Ruffner Road or anywhere else, and on Ruffner. I live at 1219, and that's where the paper street exists that this latest proposal will access the proposed development. I'm just going to reiterate some of the comments I made to the planning board last week. This process, number one, I'm thrilled to see that this committee exists and that you review the environmental, the long form. I think it's great to see that process exists to get another set of eyes and question it, and that's great. But you need to take your time, and you need to make sure that this gets the right amount of due diligence and the right amount of scrutiny. I was at the last planning board meeting. Mr. Sweet and the Mohawk Club were very aggressively pushing the planning board to get this to a vote on April 17th. We just have to make sure that it gets the right review and the right amount of attention, whether it's with your eyes, whether it's outside agencies, be that DEC, be that DOT, certainly with all the water concerns, the Army Corps of Engineers should be involved as well. So the character of the neighborhood is a key element for me. I know that there's a lot of engineering, and the town designated engineer has been named and will work through this, but the character is going to be a little bit, more difficult to probably assess and determine. But by my assessment, this will clearly destroy the character of the neighborhood, not just what is my supposed corner lot, but it's frankly the whole street in the surrounding neighborhoods. So I just wanted to make sure that my voice was heard here. I appreciate the time and appreciate the process that you guys are going through, and we'll be following it closely. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Stephen Clemente. I live at 1231 Ruffner Road, which is 2 houses down from Josh Bain, who has just spoken. I directly abut the 15 acre Mohawk golf course planned development area. I was in there today. I urged the board to, especially since they're Environmental Conservation Committee, to come in and take a look. Just walk through my backyard, walk through the fence. There's multiple holes in the fence. We can just walk around the fence and walk through an area which is exceptionally wet. It's a very, very wet area. And I too would like to have a full environmental impact long-form assessment being done by both the town engineers and this committee, because this committee is extremely important. I forwarded, we've heard the builder say previously that there's not any wildlife that lives in the area. I have videos of coyotes coming right through the fence in my backyard. It's a major thoroughfare for coyotes and foxes and deer. I have 4 deer pictures today that I sent forward and 5 pictures of the water in the prescribed area where the first 3 single-family homes are designated to be built. Extremely important for you guys to do due diligence. I echo Josh's comments. But there are other critical areas that we think are extremely important from an infrastructure standpoint, not just the surface water and areas that are there for most of the year. At any point in time, you can walk through my backyard and there's 6 inches of water as you get close to the fence. You need to have boots on to literally go through it. But there are serious concerns with sewer and water access, in addition to the fact that Josh Spain's house is going to have 3 roads around 3 sides of it. We don't think it fits from a planning standpoint. You may note, please, that the Mohawk Golf Club has 2,200 feet on Balltown Road, 680 feet on Union Street, and multiple accesses to the country club neighborhood. And we don't see a reason why they should affect the character and the peaceful existence of our neighborhood. We have enough traffic on Ruffner Road right now. It's a very much a cut-through street. Many young families are moving in. There are no sidewalks. It's 25 to 30 feet wide. You get a couple of FedEx trucks and the garbage trucks in there, or a school bus going by, and it stops traffic on the whole street. So there are better alternatives within the 190 acres, in the opinion of myself and the 150 plus people that have signed a petition that oppose this development. And we urge you to take a look, come and see us. We'll walk you around and show you the issues that we have, and that, you know, make it not a solid planning effort for the town of Niskayuna. We have bald eagles on the street. Hopefully at some point in time, you guys can take a look at the onslaught of videos that we've sent to Laura, and stills of the wildlife that are everything from pileated woodpeckers to bald eagles. You call it wolf, coyotes, deer. The moose came through my backyard last year. They cut across the golf course. So from a character standpoint, we think that this is a piece of property that should be protected and that should choose one of the many, many other alternatives that the Mohawk Golf Club has. I thank you very much for your time and your fair consideration. Thank
I
you.
got a couple of follow-up questions, please.
Sure.
First of all, thank you for coming and addressing us. And you mentioned wildlife, right?
Mhm.
Can you give the committee an idea of when, meaning what point in time these wildlife sightings occurred? Like you mentioned, the
sure.
woodpecker.
Sure, they're on photos. Today, the deer were there about, there were 4 that went through.
I'm going to stop it. The deer are fairly common, but you mentioned the woodpecker and the bald eagle and
Oh, yeah,
you know.
yeah. Pileated woodpeckers all the time. I put a new shed in last year, and they beat the heck out of all the corners for some reason. I don't think my shed construction guy used solid pine, and they have all the trim all beat up all over. That's not a pileated, that's like a standard redheaded. But I have pines in the back between the gap between the woodlot and my property that are dead, and the pileated and the other woodpeckers have really destroyed them. You can take a look. They're there all the time. Wildlife wise, I think the most recent coyote shots, I saw them 3 times 2 weeks ago. I haven't seen them this week because I was in New York, but New York City. But 9:15 and 9:15, lots of rabbits, right? So they're all doing their hunting. They hunt excessively through that. And in the spring, they have a den back there. I actually have audio tapes of my dog sitting on a back porch talking to him at 9:30 at night. Those are all time stamped and dated, that I've sent to Laura. So it's fairly consistent. Are they living in the area? You know, a person walks through a 15-acre lot. It's not very big. You can drive the wildlife out significantly, but it is a part of their hunting pattern. They frequently cut through, heading down towards Hedgewood, right through our house and my neighbor across the street. And again, I've got them documented on video, so you want to take a look at them.
Yeah,
It's
which
great.
brings me
All
to
different times of the day.
my second follow-up questions. Like you used a rather important word for our committee's deliberations, like a corridor, a wildlife corridor. Like, why do you say that? Where are they? Where do you think they're coming from, and where are they going?
That's a good question. So there's a lot up on Rosendale that's 5 acres with a big old house on it. There's a 5-acre lot in there. The deer are pretty consistently in there, as well as the coyotes, because our neighbors who also oppose the development have pictures of them, which is, I don't know, 10 houses up probably from where we are. But there's pockets of woodlots that they use as corridor paths. This just happens to be a 15-acre parcel is a large parcel in our neighborhood of pure woods and wildlife area. So it's a refuge for them, and it's part of the ecosystem. And for those of us who are environmentalists, we don't think it should be disturbed when there are other options across the property of the 190 acres that could be utilized. There's a nice mix of trees. I mean, we were looking at 75-year-old oaks. I've spent my life in the woods. I can tell you how old that tree is. There's a ton, there's a significant amount of mature oaks on the property. There's some wetland trees as well because it's wet. More softer woods and cottonwoods and stuff like that. But shagbark hickory, a lot of shagbark hickory in there, white pine. So I urge you to take a look. The practical experience is the best thing. You'll see all the sign. You'll see the deer runs. You'll see the wildlife runs working through the property. And I want you to know that it's there. That's part of the character of the neighborhood. We moved in from Skodak a year and 4 months ago. I had 8 acres with a pond and 200 acres of woods around me and a 26-acre field across the street. You couldn't even see a house. One of the reasons we bought this house, we had the size down because we're getting older, is the woodlot behind it. And, potentially now it's gone. And we like the character of the neighborhood. We like the fact that it was, a lot of wildlife in the area. While we were here looking at the house, we saw wildlife. So we said,
And
okay,
if I may again interject, the plans submitted by the developer do allow quite a bit of buffer between existing homeowners and
30
their
to 50,
proposed.
30 to 50 feet. Actually.
Mm-hmm.
That's not really significant in my opinion, but 30 to 50 feet, I guess we'll have to see if the animals will use that corridor or be driven out to go to some other spaces. I don't think that's significant, my personal opinion, but I don't think 30 to 50 feet is significant.
Thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Hi, my name is Johanna Horowitz, and I wanted to go next because actually our backyard is one of the big corridors. I sent some pictures to Laura that she forwarded on to you, and I wanted to come and speak to you about all the water. I mean, you could say, yes, it's wet, but somehow I thought the pictures would really convey it's really wet. There's a tremendous amount of water back right behind our house. And that area where all the water is the narrowest part of the buffer. It's on the southernmost end of that strip. It's probably the 30-foot area. And it's the pictures that I took, those aren't one kind of pond. There's just multiple ponds everywhere. There are bullfrogs there. That's how wet it is. You're maybe ankle deep in water, a lot of mud, dries up a little bit into mud, but a lot of water. We call it the Serengeti waterhole because actually when we first moved in, the fence was pretty beat up. A lot of trees had fallen over the fence. It looked pretty terrible. And we called the Mohawk Golf Course to ask them if they'd clean up the trees that fell from their property to ours. And, we got a little bit of a delay. They never really came over. So after a while, we began to realize it was kind of a good thing because everywhere the trees had fallen, in the winter especially, you could see exactly who was using those trees to cross the fence. And there you could see possum, you could see raccoon. We had foxes, and we still do. And then there was an enormous hole in the fence. So you can, every time it rains, you can go back and take a look at everybody who's come to the water hole. They tend to come up through the hole in our fence. They go and pass in between our house and the Spain's house, which you probably see them. We'll be sitting there working on the computer, and you see something like a cow runs by. There's a very large deer who usually has 3 babies every year. Pretty tame. She goes up and eats people's hanging plants in the summertime. But also that's where we've seen the foxes, the coyotes, the turkeys. The pileated woodpecker is sort of I'm not so happy to see him. He's about this big. We've seen all kinds of hawks and bald eagles. There's a possum. We had a nuisance possum that was coming up on our deck and looking in our deck window. Really scary until we realized what it was. But that is it's a real central place for them to come because there's so much water there. The water in the beginning was a big concern because because there's so much water, we have had usually in the summer lots of mosquitoes. I mean, there's a lot of mosquitoes too. We had called Mohawk Golf Course to ask if they could remedy it somehow. And I was told, this was probably 33, 34 years ago, they would love to, but they could not because it was a designated wetlands. Now, I thought it was a dedicated wetlands all this time, but as this process is working through right now, it would appear to me that it's not a dedicated wetland. So it seems like it's a dedicated wetland when it's good for them and kind of not a designated wetlands when it's not. But at any rate, we have a lot of concerns about disrupting that area. It's the narrowest area in that whole, so-called buffer zone. It's really wet, a tremendous amount of water. The house that will be placed there is the closest house of any of the houses they're going to build to the backs of the Ruffner houses. It will directly impinge upon that corridor that's already there. I mean, it's going to be right there. Where they're coming from, I could tell you because we see their tracks. They come from north. They go north. They go into that kind of strip, and there are quite a few trails. Some are deer trails and some are other kinds of trails, but there's quite a few animal trails. But they do come through that big hole in our fence. They like to go up our side yard. We have apple trees there, which they like to go to. So I would really ask you to consider some of these factors. If you would like to come and take a look at the ponds we've got back there, I'd really be happy to bring you and give you a tour. Just wear waterproof boots. Okay, thank you very much for your time.
Hi, good evening. My name is John Baranowski, 1101 Hedgewood Lane. I do not live on Ruffner Road. I don't know if that makes me a NIMBY or not in regard to this application. I was listening to the comments. I wrote down a few notes. I was not prepared to speak tonight. I'm sorry if I'm a little discombobulated when I talk now, but I found it very interesting, the comments that I've heard both here tonight and previously at planning board meetings about this application, about the enjoyment, the satisfaction, and the wonder that people have for the wildlife and the trees on the property in question. So I find it striking that when I look at the application and I look at the property and look at the plans for the property, what I see is a very, very vibrant piece of land in terms of what we would call open space. And what I see is that open space being replaced by residences, and what's left as being called open space, in my opinion, really doesn't qualify anymore as open space. It's fragmented, it's thin, as someone said, it's a buffer, but I think it's unfair to call it open space. Now, the shame there is that in the average density development, special use, the town code calls for the result of an average density development project to yield open space. It doesn't talk about removing it and substituting not only less space, but space that does not approach the quality of what has been eliminated by the development. To me, part of the problem there is that the ADD components of the town code are really ill-suited to a small piece of property like this, relatively small. It's impossible to give the developer, the applicant, the kind of density bonus that he needs to make this economically feasible and still come away with a gain in open space for the benefit of the community. And one of the underpinnings of the ADD concept here in this town's code and in general is that there really needs to be a strong benefit to the community. The community gains no benefit from the construction or the outline of this project in terms of its open space and all that comes with open space. Blocking light, attracting wildlife, a sense of peace and ease for the neighbors. So I looked at your minutes from the last meeting, and I see that you went over, and I'm sorry I wasn't here, but I see you went over a number of technical points in regard to the application. And what I found was that you made many good points about things that were of concern to you, some things that you did not think were of concern to you. But I saw nothing in your comments, not that you should have, I saw nothing in your comments that said, this is a benefit for this community. I see potential problems. I see technicalities that need to be worked out. What I see is the benefit of this application, should it be approved, moving entirely to the applicant's side of the equation. I see nothing for the community. And again, this brings me back to the ADD concept. The ADD concept exists to provide benefit, to mitigate that one-sided value of a project for the community. It's lacking here. I know my time's about to run out. I want to point out something else. It would be useful and important to conduct a breeding bird census of the applicant's property for this plan. I don't know if you've entertained that. I apologize if I'm going over something you've discussed already. You can commission a breeding bird study. The problem is you need to do it tomorrow because we're starting breeding bird season and that may not be feasible. So as an alternative, if any of you are aware of it, the Cornell Ornithological Laboratory provides an iPhone app called Merlin, MERLIN, which can be used by anybody, including me, who's not good with technology, to identify bird song on the spot, whether it's in woods, in your backyard, any place, by sound alone. I urge you to work with the neighbors, the adjoining property owners who are familiar with the wildlife on the property, to conduct an informal breeding bird survey and see what's there using that Merlin app. So I'm out of time. Thanks very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your comments.
You're welcome.
My name is Charles Horowitz. I live on 1223 Ruffner Road. I've been living there for 34 years, a very long time. I love my house. I love the neighborhood. One of the big concerns I have is that this development totally changes the character of my neighborhood. It does not blend in. It doesn't blend in as you look at any of the drawings that the Mohawk Club has submitted, and it doesn't blend in as you look at it from the air or any angle. It changes the neighborhood entirely, and it changes it negatively. I did read the report from the Architectural Review Board, and they made the same point. This does not blend in. They made recommendations that the houses should be kind of spread out along the fairway, and that the houses would then have a view and would become more integrated into the golf course. But this is my point exactly. There have been many recommendations from people like myself who are residents, from the Architectural Review Board. Every single recommendation to kind of manage this project so that it does not totally impact on Ruffner Road and the Rosendale neighborhood has been rejected. Every single drawing that the Mohawk Club comes up with has one thing in common, and that is do not interfere with the golf course at any cost. Interfere with the neighborhood, interfere with the people who have been living there 30 or more years, but do not disrupt the golf course one iota. To the point that even the buffer zone, there's different plans for 50 feet, and so the lots were too small, so they said, well, let's make it 30 feet. There is no concern, there is no caring about the neighborhood, and that's what's wrong with this project. If they were listened to what people like myself say, there would be a way to work this out so that the impact is distributed. But every single drawing says, no, we do not want to share any of the consequences of this project. We only want the benefits, and the neighbors and the people who live there, the people who have been living there for decades, those are the ones who should take the consequences. So I'm counting on you to stand up for the people who live here, because we are the residents and we care about the neighborhood. We would not do this to others. We would not do this to the golf course. And we need you to help us to prevent this from happening. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura, do we have anybody online who'd like to speak?
No, there isn't anybody online there.
Okay. So if everyone has spoken, I will close privilege of the floor and we'll move on.
So, and I just wanted to acknowledge that I did send you guys the email
Yep.
with the pictures. It was pretty large, so if you didn't receive it, email me. It went out about an hour ago, I think.
Yep, no, I reviewed them before I came. Okay, environmental assessment form referrals. And the first one we have is EAF 2023-01, and that's 39 State Street. That is the Kia dealership. And the applicant wants to put a parking lot adjacent to his dealership. It will involve taking down 2 houses, and we've seen it before.
Chairman, because the applicant isn't here, and I would be okay with taking the agenda out of order if you wanted to.
We can, would that please the board, or? Okay, we can take it out of order. I'm fine with that.
Just save the people in the room some time, and then we can work on State Street.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's fine. That's fine. Okay, so EAF 2022-08, 1851 Union Street, Mohawk Golf Club. Mr. Sweet, would you like to address the board at all, or?
Good evening, Bill Sweet, representative from Mohawk Golf Club. Per Laura's email this morning, we weren't required to attend, so I'm not prepared to speak this evening. I just came to monitor,
Okay.
so I have no comment. Thank you.
That's fine. Okay, the Mohawk Golf Club proposal, we have seen several times. There have been multiple iterations on that. There are two plots in our packet. One is for an average density development, and the second one is for single family homes. You'll notice that the difference in this one from the early ones we've seen is that the applicant is going to utilize a stub, which was set aside when the Ruffner Road development was put in. And you can see it on the drawing right now. In this particular proposal, the house will not be taken down, and there will be an emergency access. It's not a road, but it will be a way that an emergency vehicle could get in there, reinforced sod, so it could hold the weight, and it would provide access in case the entrance was blocked for some reason, and they had to get an emergency vehicle in. Go ahead. Were you going to say something?
Yeah. So there are multiple versions that we have seen. So is that the version we are finally considering right now? The
Yeah. So
final-
he was
final-
clarifying that when we went through the EAF last time, the home was proposed to be removed. So we will need to go through the EAF again with the proposal that does not remove the home, which is this proposal. Scheme 2. Yeah. But this is the fleshed out semi-engineered version of Scheme 2.
And then the proposal with the single family homes is,
That is because the average density development requires that you can show the same density. But one of the things to consider, this is an EAF referral on the special use permit for the average density development. So one of the things that you might consider is, in the average density code, it does talk about what are the benefits of an average density development versus a single family subdivision. So I felt it was useful if you guys were diving into the actual average density part of the code to have the single family home subdivision in your packet.
okay, thank you. Okay, so at our last meeting, we had a discussion about this development, and we talked about several issues and some concerns. And what I'd like to do is I'd just sort of like to pick up from that conversation we had.
So I just want to make sure. So I see what's before me, but I still don't have the information on the sewer, and I don't have the information on the water. Is that correct?
There's no sewer engineering or water engineering report.
So, okay.
And I think the planning board was a little bit careful about making sure that this is just a recommendation to the town board on the special use permit, and that they still need to work through the subdivision, engineering for the subdivision. Should the average density development permit be granted, it still has to come back to the planning board for subdivision. The Conservation Advisory Council occasionally separates out their recommendations, which is essentially what the planning board did. And because you don't have those engineering reports, like, my recommendation would be to make sure that this is your environmental assessment form review for the special use permit action that the town board is taking. And then that would give you guys another chance to review the environmental assessment form should it return for the subdivision, in which case you would have much more robust engineering at that time.
Okay. And this, but this still doesn't meet the requirements for emergency vehicles.
We haven't had a TDE look at it, but we definitely have used grass emergency access as a secondary means of access for a subdivision. So I don't, we'll have a TDE double check that. Was one of the questions the planning board had with the long cul-de-sac and this type of proposed emergency access. But I think that we have used something similar, so I wouldn't like look at that and outright say that's not compliant with code.
And this becomes a town road.
This is proposed by the applicant to be a town road that, yeah. We do know that the engineering department will require the road to be in the center of the right of way. It's in this drawing, not proposed in the center. But that's, I'd say probably on a minor side of the environmental review.
Laura, please forgive my little confusion here. So what exactly is the special use permit that we are considering here?
So the special use permit it's an average density development. And what it does is it allows a developer to go from a single family subdivision like that. And it allows the developer to shrink those lots to half of what the bulk zoning requirements would be in order to set aside open space.
Okay.
Among other things, if you guys want me to dive into that code for you tonight, I'm happy to do so. I can pull up some of the finer points on it. But the, like some towns call them conservation subdivisions, it doesn't allow any more density that would be allowed under the existing zoning, but it does allow the lots to be smaller.
Okay. One of the speakers in the privilege of the floor mentioned that if you grant the ADD, I don't recall the exact terminology they used, but if you grant the ADD, then it should positively benefit the community or something like that. Do we something specific like that in the Niskayuna code?
Yeah, there's specific guidelines for the average density development.
But you don't have to go in depth in great gory detail. My question is like very specific. Does it explicitly say that there should be a positive benefit to the community, like the person on the privilege of the floor mentioned?
So, I mean, essentially, yes, it is. The intent is to make the best use out of the natural landscape and topography, and if it lends itself to clustering the homes so that you can protect the open space, then that's a good consideration for the average density development.
I can give you an example of that. When Hummingbird Manor went in, it was I think it was a 30-acre parcel, and the developer set aside 14 acres of that, which was adjacent to the Rice Sanctuary. So that would be a average use density.
Okay. Set aside meaning like forever wild with a deed restriction or conservation easement.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so like a bit of the language is, that the purpose of the average density development is to permit variations in lot size and housing type in order to encourage flexibility of design, facilitate adequate and economical provisions of streets and utilities, and preserve the natural and scenic qualities of open space in accordance with the intent of Section 281 of the Town Law of New York State. So the conditions for lot size reduction include that the land thus gained is preserved as permanent open space for the use of residents in the area.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Based on, I'm just speaking for myself here. I want to make that clear. Based on the comments of based on the clarification that Laura provided and the concerns raised regarding wildlife and natural space and the plans presented before us, in my opinion, the proposed development falls short of that goal.
And sorry, I'm just going to read one more section of code.
Mm-hmm.
For the open space requirements, there's quantitative considerations and qualitative considerations. And the qualitative are that the land shall be type or character suitable for the purposes for which such land shall be primarily reserved. So playgrounds, neighborhood parks, or natural or conservation areas such as natural water courses. Open space, they recommend, could be suitable to place on the edge of the subdivision so that additional land may be added at such time as the adjacent land is subdivided.
I do remember discussing this point on a previous meeting, and I believe we did ask that question rather specifically about whether the developer is willing to set aside some land for permanent conservation. I do remember the discussion.
Yeah, and he does have in the proposal that area that we discussed by Jaffrey Street.
Mhm.
It's not showing up on that drawing, but they do have in one of their planning board packages shown offset 14 area that would be for no further subdivision, but would still be allowed to be used by the golf course. So in the future, it wouldn't be that they couldn't, like, if for some reason they need to move the fairway, they would be allowed to take down the trees and use it for golf course development, but not for future subdivision.
Well, if the trees are allowed to be removed, that, for me at least, removes a prime incentive of conservation.
Yeah, because it's a no further subdivision clause,
Yeah.
but it wouldn't mean that it would be to the exclusion of the golf club.
Yeah, it seems to be distinctly different from the Hummingbird property and their course of action that Chairman Stryer mentioned.
Because it's not a deed restriction conservation easement, it is different, but it is a no further subdivision.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
I have a question. One of the people speaking, I'm not sure who's mentioned that they felt that there were other parts of the golf course that would be more appropriate for development than the parcel near Ruffner Road. And I did see that there were two parcels at one point for sale. One was the one we're discussing now, and the other was near Balltown Road. And I'm wondering if anybody knows the status of the parcel affronting Balltown Road.
Yeah, the applicant has addressed that a couple times at the planning board. And at this time, they're not interested in developing the parcel on Balltown Road. It's not for sale.
It's not currently anymore because it was at one time.
Yeah, it's not currently for sale. That's the area that they use for their little 9-hole small par, 3-par. And that's been brought up a couple times at the planning board if they would be willing to look at moving this development over there. And the answer to that has been that they would like to protect that. It's something that they use to, like, if people are learning how to play golf. So it's something that they could use to encourage membership from youth and to keep the golf course, viable. So they've stated that they don't want to use that parcel for development.
Thanks.
It doesn't mean it couldn't be in the future, but it's currently not on the table for development.
Okay, thank you.
So I guess I wish that that they had included that what we had discussed in this plan for that other section, because I feel like everything matters. So that the parcel that we had discussed and I didn't see it written up. Should I assume? I don't want to assume.
No, I think, Ellen, though, I think to Laura's point, when we discussed that, they retain the right to use it as part of the golf course.
Right.
That was never changed. I mean, so there was the property, and basically they were saying it would not get developed with housing. I just want to make that clear.
Right.
So I think I have it in writing under some planning board, but the Conservation Advisory Council, again, would have the power to make a conditional recommendation that be included if that's the tipping point to any recommendation. Yeah.
So go ahead, Ellen. Jeff.
I think I'm ready.
Okay. I went through the comp plan and there's just a couple points that I would like to make that came out on that. And this is the 2013 plan. And one of the things that comes out is that the comprehensive plan says that we should protect both cultural, historic landmarks and open space. And in some respects, the Mohawk Golf Club fits both of those. It was founded in 1898. It's a cultural landmark valued in Niskayuna as well as the Capital District. Other comments in the plan is, and this is a quote, the Mohawk Golf Club surrounds the adjacent neighborhood, particularly the country club neighborhood and the surrounding area, and gives a sense of open space. And I think that's generally what the comments we've heard throughout this particular process. The other thing is that this parcel is the largest privately owned parcel used for recreation in a densely populated area of Niskayuna, primarily Old Niskayuna, the town overlay district, Upper Union Street, and Ruffner Road and the surrounding areas. And if you look at public parks, there's about 500 acres of public parks. And then there's another group that's 443 acres designated as private preserves and recreation. And of that number, the Mohawk Golf Club is 190 of those acres. So it's a substantial part of that. So when you talk about open space in Niskayuna, this parcel is quite large. A couple other comments that come up is that the plan acknowledges that open space is a non-renewable resource and that as Niskayuna approaches full build-out, it's important to protect open space that may disappear without some upfront planning, okay? And one of the things that the plan does suggest that the town do is to develop a recreation open space plan that examines park and open space and recreational spaces and basically position the town to envision the future development and the residents' needs. And it talks about strategies that need to be developed in order to achieve this goal. So I think in some respects, we've started that with the NRI, the Natural Resource Inventory, where we're going through the town and looking at those resources. The other couple things that the comprehensive plan says in it is that the town, when considering the value of undeveloped land, should consider the benefit of open space, as well as the economic, traffic, public utility implications as if the land was developed to its fullest. So I think when I read that, what we have here is we have a substantial open space in a very, very dense part of town. It's central in its location, and I have raised this concern before, and I'm concerned that without a long-term plan for this property, we may lose this particular piece of open space development by development. And in some respects, I think this particular development here provides access for future development that the golf course could utilize. I mean, once you get a road with an open where you can put spurs on them, you can see how this could get developed in the future. The comprehensive plan also talks about the value of this particular parcel, and it's mentioned several times that if the club becomes available, it should consider purchasing it, using it as a municipal golf course, relocating its entire recreational facilities at this location. And this is mentioned multiple times that the town should do something or take action to sort of protect this or work with the Mohawk Golf Club in order to come up with a long-range plan. So when I read that, I think obviously the parcel's not for sale. But what it does is it shows that the comp plan realizes the value of this piece of property and that the town should take action to protect this property, or at least come up with a way that is developed so it's not lost. And I understand the importance that the Mohawk Golf Club currently does provide to this area as open space, but also as a golf course. I mean, people like to play golf, and it's an asset in that respect to the town as well. So I just thought I would share some of the comments that the comprehensive plan, it's mentioned about a half a dozen times within the document. So Laura, we had made some other comments about this property. Do you want to just go through them?
Yeah, so at our last meeting, I know we were working really hard to come to our recommendation. Again, this is slightly different because the home is no longer being removed, and I know that that was an issue for the planning board as well as this board.
Laura, sorry to interrupt. Could you quickly point with your mouse the home that is not going to be removed?
Right here, this home is no longer proposed to be demolished and turned into an access road.
And the dashed line is the new road.
Emergency access, which in this proposal is proposed to be grass.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. So the impact. Oh. Yeah, so you actually have to construct the emergency access. It has to be able to hold a 75,000-pound fire truck vehicle. So what you do is you actually, sort of build the sub base of a road, but then rather than paving it, you put down pavers and then soil and grass seed. But it has to remain clear and open. Theoretically, it should even be plowed in the winter. Sometimes we run into some issues with that when it's the grassed emergency access that's less likely to be plowed in the winter. But it's theoretically, it's supposed to be plowed in the winter. So typically the town is, if it's dedicated to the town as the emergency access, typically the town would plow it. Yeah. Occasionally, because we've used the grass access on a multifamily, in that case, the multifamily development does pave it, so it can be negotiated, but it should be open at all times. Sorry, Ellen.
That's okay. Even this bigger road that exists, so it has never been. I mean, there are very old trees.
Laura, just to know, I think you need to turn the microphone on.
Oh,
Sorry. So I just wanted
turn it on and just pull it forward.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. So I did, in this area where this paper road is, there are, I mean, it has never been developed. So there are a large number of trees that will have to be taken down in order to do this. I mean, they're very old trees in that area.
Between the two houses,
Between the
there
two homes.
are trees that would
Yeah.
have to be removed to put the road in. Yeah.
Yes.
You wouldn't be able to avoid them.
Yes.
Did you guys have any other?
I guess, so I have a lot of concerns, and I'm very new to the Conservation Advisory Council, so I'm learning a little bit about process and historical. So I did a little bit of looking up of what has been going on over the past few years. I saw an interview with Mr. Sweet in the Gazette a couple of years ago, and you do say in that interview, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, that the input from the homeowners is very important, and that there was some type of forum. I don't know what type of forum it was. I don't know if it was here or somewhere else, where you were quoted as saying there was some negative input and there was some positive input, but that you were going to behave in a way that was so that the homeowners, particularly on Ruffner, were in agreement. And I know that as a body, we are not supposed to take the homeowners' opinions into account necessarily, because, there are many times that homeowners don't want something in their area, but they would be okay maybe with it being in someone else's. And there are different reasons for that. But to me, it speaks a little bit to a lack of sort of bad faith. And it doesn't put a lot of trust in me to know that, you know, if something is said, that will be actually accurately followed up, you know, with action. And, you know, there are many times when developers are supposed to leave trees or save trees. I see it in the Adirondacks and other places, or homeowners, you know, there are actual laws against taking down trees of a certain size or building too close to waterfront, and these things are ignored. And there are very, very few consequences. And if there are some, maybe they pay the fine and then they get to do what they want. So that's my concern, is that there won't be these mitigation measures taken for the woodland that's going to disappear because of this development, even if it's promised. So that's my concern.
I'd like to follow up on what Vicky said and note that we have read an outstanding a really big number of comments from neighbors, and I don't believe I saw too many of them that were positive. I don't believe I saw even one that was that was positive. And it's over. The residents seem to be overwhelmingly opposed, and especially in light of what the average density development is supposed to provide to the community as a benefit, I have grave and serious concerns.
Okay, I just have to say for the record again that generalized opposition, even if it's very well and thoughtfully laid out, is not a reason that any board can deny a project. And if you rely on it, it won't stand. So when we talk about getting community input on a project, it's very relatively normal when a project is going to cause disturbance to land that you will get opposition from neighbors. That's relatively normal. It doesn't mean that you need to discount points that they're bringing up. There's a lot of, there's a lot of knowledge that comes from people who live in the area, which is really important to hear and to take into account and to explore. But I want you guys to be very careful about citing public comment as a reason for environmental impact. I think you can say that you've heard, testimony of, animals in the area and things like that, but generalized opposition is not an environmental impact that you can take into account when you're reviewing these projects. I know a couple of you are new. It's very normal on projects to have generalized opposition.
Yeah, I would just like to add on that. So, depending on what we base our decision on is specifics related to the environment, character of the community, the ability of the town to, through utilities and other services to provide that and working with that. So, yeah, I would just like to reiterate what Laura said.
And it's hard when you have a room of 100 people who are staring at you. It's hard. But you do have to make sure that you're hearing those comments, and they're important, but that you've got to pull out what you do and then balance those comments with your code and your, the things that you're bound by when you're reviewing them.
That's a very good point. Thank you for raising it.
Chelsea, you've been awful quiet. Do you have any comments you'd like to make?
Yeah, I'm just more concerned about the drainage of the property. I know it can be super wet back there, and that was kind of something that I've been focused on this whole process. I know in their EAF, I don't think this is the new one yet, but they did say it moderately well drained 100% of the site, and I'm curious if that's accurate. So that's a big point for me, because it could impact the neighborhood if the site is completed and a lot of the water issues start to come about of that. So that's just something I want to reiterate, that we make sure we're looking into.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so at the last meeting, kind of where we had landed with the reviewing of the long form EAF is that the impact to utilities was a concern. The clearing of 14 acres of land had impact to aesthetics and created a loss of habitat for a number of different species. Even at the last meeting, we noted that the parcel was a core part of the public-private recreation and open space, and we were concerned with the impact on the character of the neighborhood. Removing the home was a concern because it would set a bad precedence for the town of Niskayuna. Obviously, the developer did hear that comment and removed that from the plan, so I think that no longer factors into the CAC's review. And then we also talked that there were alternatives proposed by the applicant that mitigate some of the impacts to the surrounding community and the neighborhood disruption. And we were concerned that some of those alternatives that have left impact were not being pursued. And the last thing that we noted was the public road that runs through the golf course could open up further development of the parcel, which is concerning. That leads to a lot of what Mr. Strayer was just talking about with our comprehensive plan, that there needs to be a long-term plan for the golf club. So when we went through part 2, which we can do again, but I think there's a fair number of the questions that are still, limited to no impact. So I'm just going to hone in on the ones that we identified as potential impacts so that we can review and revise them, which was question 1, that at least in the EAF that was submitted, it stated that the water table is at 2 feet. Drainage is a concern to be evaluated. I know that the developer has stated that they will do a secondary wetlands determination, but we don't have that information yet. Question in part 2 of the EAF, question 3, with the impacts on the surface water. The drainage to the railroad Whammer Hilltop Drive area has to be evaluated. Question number 7, the impacts to the land, plants, and animals. We identified a substantial impact to the predominant species and a conversion of more than 10 acres of forest. Question 9, impact on aesthetic resources. We indicated a publicly seen diminished enjoyment of aesthetic resource. Impact on historic and archaeological resources. We indicated that the golf course may be on the 1982 historic inventory, which should be evaluated. Question 11, impact on open space and recreation. The impairment of ecosystem services and wildlife habitat and potential loss of future recreational resource was identified as substantial impact. The impact of transportation is still being evaluated. And then questions 17 and 18 identified as large impacts, consistency with community plans and consistency with community character. I don't think that this plan is significantly different in terms of questions 1, 3, 7, 9, 10, and 11, and 13. But we should review 17 and 18 because we would have to distinguish if the consistency with community plans and consistency with community character with the change in the plans for the home staying, if that changes your recommendation to 17 and 18.
Laura, could you, I'm so sorry to ask it again, like, could you one more time go over the ADD
Yes.
thing from the, because to me, that is like really important.
No, it is. It's really critically important.
Yeah.
I do think that understanding what the public benefit is to the average density development and open space is important to note in your factors of consideration. So, oops, I lost it. Hold on a second.
Like if it's on the Niskayuna webpage, you can like shoot me a quick link and I can like read through the text myself.
Yeah, it is. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I can be on 2 computers at once and that's why. Okay, so that the purpose of an average density development is to permit a variation in lots. Sorry. I don't know why, but sometimes when I hit my computer, it just starts scrolling. Actually, the purpose of this section is to permit variation in lot size and housing type in suitable areas in order to encourage flexibility of design, facilitate the adequate and economical provisions of streets and utilities, and preserve the natural and scenic qualities of open space in accordance with the intent of Section 281 of the Town Law of New York State.
Yeah, could you read the text starting from "and preserve"?
Okay. And preserve the natural and scenic qualities of open space in accordance with the intent of Section 281 of the Town Law of New York State. I can also pull that up if you give me a second.
And the first part talked about flexibility to permit flexibility and basically to provide more options, right?
Yeah, so I think, not having written the code, but having tried to implement it a couple of times,
Okay.
is that when there's a place that lends itself to shrinking the lots down so that there's a good preservation of open space, that's when you would really want to use the average density development tool.
Mhm.
Just because the proposal, just for the record, the applicant has the right to do a subdivision without average density development as well. So you have to consider whether the average density development, is a good tool for this particular part of the land, or whether that, it's not lending itself to that scenic quality and open space. And that's the balance with the average density development.
Why don't applicants always go for the non-average density development?
Well, there's benefits to the applicant from an average density development. It's less road that they have to build, so less impervious space, although that's obviously also a benefit, for some environmental reasons. And then clustering the homes, like just generally speaking, if you cluster the infrastructure, there's cost savings from clustering the infrastructure. And I think at least in this case, the applicant has represented that they have tried to shrink the lots down in order to provide the buffer to the adjacent residents. I think the main intent of the shrinking of the lots here is there's a corner in the proposal there, which is in your packet, where the open space is at 200, which is what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be at 200 feet, and they've got they don't actually have that section labeled. They're saying that the whole open space is 2.72 acres. That's going to include the buffer.
Well, 220 by 220 square is 1 acre. So 220 by 220. So that circle is not it's less than an acre.
The circle of the 200 square feet of,
Yes.
or sorry, of the 200.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that puts that in perspective.
It's not. It's that includes the proposed nature buffer with existing homeowners, like the 30 feet one.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's 50. But I think that is that.
So I think that the reg basically says you have to set aside X amount of space, but it doesn't necessarily tell you how to do it. However, there are recommendations, and the 200 foot is the minimum size of that set aside.
Sorry, Chairman, I lost you. 200 feet where?
200, no,
Yeah.
the 200 foot circle.
Okay, 200
In other words-
square feet.
What?
No, are you talking about square feet?
No,
or
I'm talking about on the right-hand side of the development, in that triangular region, there's a
Uh-huh.
circle there.
Okay.
That circle meets the 200 foot requirements of the law
Right here.
or the recommendation, that circle there.
Okay. Right.
It's
there.
not the whole parcel.
Okay.
So when you read it as, 2.75 acres, it's not the same as having a parcel that's square, that's greater than 200 by greater than 200.
Okay.
That's all I'm trying to say.
Okay. Thank you.
Maybe more complicated, I'm making it. So let's go back and circle back to question 17. Laura, could you read 17?
Yep, so 17 on the part 2 of the EAF is consistency with the community plans. The proposed action, and it's up to you guys to determine whether or not the proposed action is consistent with adopted land use plans or is not. The applicant has answered on their form, which is part C1, C2, and C3. Oops, wait a minute, sorry. Part 1, C2, C3. Part 1, Part 1. I'm looking at the wrong thing, sorry. Here we go. I can pull it up for you in a second if you want to see. So the applicant has indicated, will the administrative or legal adoption or amendment of the plan, local law, ordinance, rule, or regulation be granted for the action to proceed? So it does not need a local law, so the answer to that is no. And then, do any municipal adopted comprehensive land use plans include the site where the proposed action would be located? The answer to that is yes. The comprehensive plan, does the comprehensive plan include specific recommendations for the site? The answer to that is yes. Is the site located within any local or regional special planning district? The answer to that is yes. The New York State Heritage Area, Mohawk Valley Heritage Corridor. And then the last part of that is the proposed action located wholly or partially within an area listed in an adopted municipal open space plan, to which they answered no.
So could we let's just peel that back a little bit. It's not on the historic register for New York State, right? For
No,
archaeological?
it's not. Nope,
Okay,
definitely
so
not.
we know the answer to that question. Okay. So I guess the big question on this is, let's go back to the first question there, which is it, could you just read that part again?
Sorry.
Laura, could you tell us, like, in the 96-page PDF, like, what specific page you are in right now?
Yeah, here, I'll put it up on the screen. Well, hold on. So the applicant submits part 1. Part
Yep.
1 is what I was just reading to you. Part 2, part 2 I always have up on my screen, which I often share with you. But I'm going to see if I can do a shared screen so you can see how I'm comparing both of them. Here we go. Let me see if I can do this.
Is it in our packet? That
No.
thing?
Part 1 is in your packet. Part
Part
2
two
we
is-
fill out during the meeting.
But I Googled the NYS seeker form, and my numbers don't match with what you have.
Here. Bye, Simran. Okay, so you have to make sure you're on the full environmental assessment form, Ashok.
Okay.
But we're on question 17, which is here. It's really hard to read.
I'm not going to be able to read it.
Which is consistency with community plans. Unlike, do you see part 17 references the EAF that the applicant submitted, which is what I was just reading to you,
Yep.
which is over here. So like a lot of times when you guys are going through them, I have both of them up on my screen. But it's hard for you to see that. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
I think we should just go through
Okay,
the
let's- yeah.
parts of it one by one and have a discussion about it.
That's what we usually do.
Yep.
So for 17, because this is a long form, not short form usually takes us much less time, is you have to decide whether the proposed action is or is not consistent with adopted land use plans.
Well, based on the comments that Chairman Strayer made with the comprehensive plan, which does talk about land use.
So, well, let me just read a couple. I know you can't see them. I'm just to guide that answer. So is the proposed action different from or in sharp contrast to current surrounding land patterns. Will the proposed action cause the permanent population of the city, town, or village to grow by more than 5%? Is the proposed action inconsistent with local land use plans or zoning regulations? Is it inconsistent with any county plans or regional plans? Will it cause a change in the density of development that is not supported by existing infrastructure? Is it located in an area characterized by low density development and it will require new or expanded public infrastructure? And does it have the potential to induce secondary development impacts, e.g. residential or commercial development not included in the proposed action? And then you have a category for other. But like, just to give you some planning guidance, I mean, it's not in sharp contrast to the surrounding land use patterns. It's not doing anything more than 5%. It is allowable under the zoning regulations. It may be inconsistent with the comprehensive plan. So that's kind of,
Yeah, that was my view on
Yeah.
it, was that there's an inconsistency there.
Yeah. And also the utilities and the other
is it in an area characterized by low density development that will require new or expanded public infrastructure and may induce secondary
Yeah.
development impacts?
I mean, that's unknown right now, but the assumption is it will.
We'll need a new water line, sewer line, and stormwater
Yeah.
detention ponds. Yes. That is true of most subdivisions.
Yeah. Well, this, I thought there was a concern about the overall sewer line, though, capacity. Has that
Yeah,
been
so-
resolved with the town, or?
Initially, this proposal was going to drain to a sewer line that was at capacity, and essentially that was going to be a no-go because the town couldn't, I mean, the cost that it would take to drain, to upgrade that line wouldn't allow for this project to move forward. But because it's at the crest of Ruffner, they were able to direct the sewer line to a different line. So it's no longer being discharged to the line that's full. It's being discharged to a line like that goes under Rosendale Elementary School. It still requires a full sewer engineering report to make sure that that can work and will be, but it doesn't have the known capacity issues of the Kelts Farm line that's on River Road.
Okay. So I think part of the challenge here is it is zoned R1. So there can be single-family homes on this property. It's inconsistent with the current use. And there is this identification of this parcel in the comp plan as being a valuable open space.
I'm thinking answer yes for two of those, moderate to large for two of those questions, and no for the rest. Like, that's what I'm working
Okay,
from.
so what would you,
The plan that the comp plan you mentioned, and the inducing of the secondary development. Like you mentioned, like,
Yeah, yeah.
it leaves open that once the road is there, it leaves open the possibility of further chopping up.
Mhm.
And the utilities.
Okay.
Okay, so then the answer to
Wait. For the utilities, like, I mean, how much beyond the normal are we talking about? Like, it's not going to be a huge additional increase, right? So I'm comfortable with saying small for the utilities.
I mean, the utilities, they may require actually some of the lots. I mean, if the engineering department requires that a public lift station gets installed, they may have to like remove one of the lots. But typically the utilities are a solvable engineering problem, typically. So I think you could, from your comments, the consistency with community plans, mark yes. The proposed action is not consistent with adopted land use plans, leaning heavily on how your interpretation is.
Mhm.
of the comprehensive plan. And then where your main concerns would be C and G.
Mhm.
And you could put E, and then with a note that you need to see more engineering on the utility.
Well,
to be
I mean, there
comfortable.
are others in the committee. If I'm the only one having the thing about the utilities,
No,
I'll defer.
I think my concern was that we got ourselves into trouble once before with the sewage plant. And I just wanted to make sure that there were other options.
There are other options than the existing at capacity sewer line.
I mean, that, in some sense, that is more of a development issue, right?
The capacity sewer at the capacity of the.
Yeah, in other
Brook
words,
sewer line.
if we're making a motion or we're discussing the special use permit per se,
Yes, you
I
really
mean,
want
in
to
a
focus more on the
development,
use.
when you saw the actual development, because we don't necessarily know what that looks like, that would be more nuts and bolts. I agree with you, Ellen. We need to understand that the utilities can match the capacity, but
So I just feel like if you're going to say that you don't know what the secondary development that's coming off of this, and you don't know what's going to happen to the utilities. And
I see.
so I don't
okay,
understand how you
okay.
can say yes to, you can say yes, no to something else and not no to, or yes to, something that is going to affect your utilities. So that's just what my thought.
I hadn't considered the way what you're thinking there. I thought you were talking about this specific development, but you're not. You're talking in general.
I'm speaking specifically and generally, because if part of the issue is that then this opens the door, then it opens the door to more utilities as well.
Okay, then what I would suggest is that is probably something good to put in the other category,
Okay.
because it goes in line with potentially opening up this development to additional development in the future, and that is something that the town should look at.
Okay. I'm okay.
Would that be something that they would have to get permission for or no?
Well, I think right now we're just looking at potential impacts. I mean, we're not asking the town to do that right now. We're just going through this. I think what we'll do is we'll go through the process, and then what we'll do is we'll decide how we're going to vote on this, or if we're going to vote on this tonight, and then make specific recommendations. Because I think depending on how the vote went, you'd want to be very specific about what your concerns were.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay, so
I had one question, please. The actual title of question 17, where it says consistency, right? The first word, consistency with community plans. Does a town comprehensive plan count as a community plan?
Yes.
Okay. In that case, I'm comfortable with the two items that I mentioned. Yeah.
okay.
But I think, Laura, we need to capture
Yeah,
elements
so
of concern in there as
Yeah,
well,
so what we would
right?
typically do is identify the elements of concern, and then in your recommendation and vote, identify, whether that's the moderate to large impact, what your expectations would be to mitigate that, or if it needs an environmental impact statement.
Mhm. Okay,
Okay,
so let's just
eight-
review what that question is, Laura.
Okay, so I have that we're marking the proposed action is not consistent with adopted land use plans because of concerns over 17C, inconsistent with local land use plan. It is consistent with the zoning regulation. And then, it's consistent with what's allowed in an R1 zone. I guess the other point of clarification here is whether or not you feel that it's consistent with an average density development zoning regulation. I don't know if you want to discuss that or not, but.
Well, I think from my perspective on this is that you have a zoning that's inconsistent with the town plan, right?
Yeah, so I think there's two sections here. The comprehensive plan identified a like how valuable this land was, and that they didn't want to see it be and go into piecemeal development, and that's a big
Yeah.
concern for the town. So I think trying to understand what this development is in the context of the large parcel
Right.
is important and supported by the comprehensive plan. As far as the zoning regulations go, though, I mean, the subdivision is allowable in the zoning regulations. The sort of the nuance on that is whether or not the average density development, whether or not this proposal is suitable for an average density development.
The point I was going to make on that is, I think both ways of going, single family homes or an average density, potentially could have the same concern.
With the piecemeal development
With
of the
this
large
particular
parcel.
item, the piecemeal, there are benefits for an average density.
There are, yes. Okay, so we'll mark that. That really goes to the G, that the concern of the larger type of secondary development impacts, and the piecemeal review of the parcel is a concern.
I wanted to quickly revisit the average density development guideline, Laura, that you provided. And this time I was able to take notes. So it says, you're providing a buffer to preserve the natural and scenic qualities of the open space. I have concerns about the buffer provided in the current diagram.
Okay, that's fair. That would be,
So it's it seems the existing large space is now like a tape or a thin strip, and I have concern about where the wording where it says providing a buffer to preserve the natural and scenic qualities. In my opinion, the buffer could be more robust.
okay, so I will make that note. Oops. And then that leads us to the last question, consistency with community character. Is the project inconsistent with the existing community character?
Could you please do the zoom thing that you, the box zoom?
I'll try.
I could
What
read
I
it.
can do is,
Yeah.
I can make this bigger again. I'm sorry for all the clicking.
You don't need to apologize.
you
Yeah,
go.
certainly don't apologize.
There. So this is question 18, consistency with community character, and things to think about whether the project is inconsistent with the existing community character. Would it eliminate existing facility structures or areas of historic importance to the community? Does it create a demand for additional community services on schools, police, and fire? Will it displace affordable or low-income housing in an area where there is a shortage of such housing? Would it interfere with the use or enjoyment of officially recognized or designated public resources? Is it inconsistent with the predominant architectural scale and character? And is it inconsistent with the character of the existing natural landscape? Or you can put in other impacts here.
So I think the best way to go through this is let's knock out the ones that we can knock out easily. So I think C, it does not displace any existing housing.
Low income, that's true.
Right. So we can take that one off the table. For context, B, let's talk about that. Additional community services. I think in the scheme of things, as far as school, that this 22 homes is an impact, but it is, put it in perspective of other developments that we have.
Yeah, I know at the planning board a couple times they've talked about potentially reaching out to the schools and just seeing how this fits into their development plans, which I can do, will do. But the school does occasionally reach out to us and we kind of give them a sense of apartment units and things that are coming down the line. And, in terms of units, this isn't a large number
Yeah,
of
that's-
units in terms of what we talked to the school about.
It's not a large number of units, but I mean, our elementary schools, are very full. I mean, I have neighbors that, their children are not going to the local school. They have to go someplace else because they moved in past that and they all can't go to the same school. So it is a factor.
Excuse me. Yeah, I have a comment about that school, like
Yeah.
zoning as well. My question is that does that area belong to Hillside Elementary School or Rosendale Elementary School? Because I know Rosendale have the capacity, but I know like Hillside, it's really, full. So they are really like dispersing students to different schools. So it just came to my mind as well.
Yeah, it's
Looking at the map.
I think you can download the map. The school zones, they have flex zones, they have
Yeah.
regular zones.
Yeah.
I would have to get back to you on what the school zone.
Okay.
what the
I,
school zone
I
is.
can speak from personal experience. I mean, the school will reposition the boundaries of each elementary school based on the enrollment. I know that when my kids were at Hillside, they rearranged the boundaries. Now, they stayed at Hillside, but there were friends that ended up going to another school.
Yeah, and they implemented flex zones, I think,
Yeah.
so that they wouldn't have to change the boundaries that much, which would give them some flexibility. When people moved in the flex zone, they could put them into both schools. There's one flex zone actually for 3 schools. If you live in one part of Niskayuna, they have the ability to place you in 3 different elementary schools.
My gut here on this is that, yes, schools are always a concern, but we don't, given the size of the development, do we know if there's an impact? And that's an unknown right now.
I mean, I haven't reached out to the school.
Yeah, so I don't know how we can, well, from my opinion, I don't know how I could say that it has a big impact. It's just an unknown.
I think in the absence of information, we should give the developer the benefit of the doubt and say no impact.
Okay.
Okay. Let's see.
So
Go ahead.
I disagree.
Okay.
And I disagree because, because, where your kids go to school affects, I mean, these are obviously geared, probably to, older, but you can't necessarily know that,
They're not restricted.
right? So, when you have kids that are even live on the same block, and they go to 3 different schools, it affects the families and their lives. I mean, they're bringing their kids to all different schools. So it is a factor. It might be a small one, but it still is a factor.
Chelsea, would you care to weigh in on this?
Yeah, I'm siding more with Ashok on this one. I really don't think it's that much, at least worth kind of noting, in my opinion.
Um,
So just
can we-
I would say that, like, if we're talking about character impacts, I think that focusing in on
That's
the
smaller.
predominant architectural scale and character of this proposal, I think is worthy of taking a hard look at, and the character of the existing natural landscape.
Yep.
I agree. But I'm also very concerned about fire, like, but
Yeah,
Oh, because of the emergency access.
yeah.
the emergency access,
Why don't you just leave it on?
I know, in case I'm a heavy breather. Just the access for, firefighters. So anyways,
We can put that note in there.
Yeah, we should definitely put that note in that one.
So, I mean, I think you can mark on my recommendation to you, mark note as small, which we do sometimes with an advisory note that the schools should be contacted and there's concerns about the fire access.
I'm okay with that.
Okay, good.
Because it's still indicating an impact.
Thank you.
I think that's consistent with what we normally do.
Okay.
So then if you guys want to talk about the predominant architectural scale and character, which I
Yeah.
think goes to whether or not an average density development kind of works by shrinking the lots down, the clustering of the lots is
Mhm.
not in probably the same architectural scale and character as the existing homes. There are smaller lots and there's townhomes. And whether or not that harmonizes there, I'm not an expert. I have heard concerns of that, but the alternative is that you would have the larger single family lots, which are very consistent with the existing single family homes. But then they don't have that buffer. That's what, you're getting at there.
Can we have a small discussion on question D? I am intrigued by the wording where it says enjoyment.
Yeah, let's
Okay, go ahead. Chairman.
stay on the one we have now, and then we'll go back to D, or do you?
Well,
do you think D
no,
is-
Laura went to E, so that's
Well,
why I
it's
wanted to.
not a recognized or designated public resource. It's a private golf course.
Right.
So
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
not a
that
designated-
was exactly my
Okay.
question.
not a
like,
designated public
yeah,
resource.
that's exactly my
Yeah.
question.
Okay.
It may be designated as important open space, but I don't think it falls
Yeah,
under that
no.
question there.
Okay. Is that all? You just want to take it off?
Yeah,
the table?
no, I
Okay.
just wanted to take it off the table
Okay.
quickly. That's
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine. So, I think, I think there's a couple things that, from my perspective, I was concerned about the character. One of them was the monument of the previous development,
The monument sign?
the monument of the whole thing.
Oh, the monument of the whole thing.
And the boulevard and stuff, like taking down the house. And that has been mitigated to a certain extent. The impact is still going to be there somewhat because you're going to be plowing a road through there, and you're going to lose, the road will still be there. It just won't be as obvious. So I don't know, that reduces that impact a fair amount. In my mind, it doesn't get rid of it completely. And then the other question comes up to is just the whole architectural design of the houses. And Laura, what did the architectural review board actually say? What was the conclusion on that?
Yeah, the scale. We're not really looking at the home design right now
Okay, the scale.
because that would be, oops, darn it, I'm looking at the wrong thing. Hold on. Almost there. They commented that it appears to be a densified design that located as many dwellings units as possible on the land. Their suggestion was to consider a smaller number of more upscale units on larger lots, contiguous to the fairway with more picturesque views of the golf course. They were willing to work with applicants. They felt that the plan, including the positions and renderings of the proposed homes, neither capitalized on the potential for beautiful views of the golf course, nor did it blend well with the neighboring homes. That was the comments from the Architectural Review Board.
Mhm. So is there feeling that the development would be more attractive to potential buyers if it had views to the golf course? I mean, you know how typically they do housing at golf courses, and was that the driver of that, or was it more the existing neighborhood?
Clark, do you want to comment on that?
Sure. I was on the call, and I think that was their feeling that the current design that they saw, and at that time it was the design that demolished the house at 1245 Ruffner, but it still had the same general layout. They thought it would be better suited if the buildings faced the fairway a little bit more and took advantage of the views of the golf course. Now, at the most recent planning board the developer did report that all of the single-family homes would be custom-built, kind of uniquely designed single-family homes. So I was just wondering, Laura, is that something that can be a comment or a note that if the project went forward, could the CAC recommend further work with the ARB to help it blend with the community, with the neighborhood?
Yeah, that can be a comment from the CAC. The planning board also usually makes that comment.
I mean, I think you'd be looking at diversity of housing types,
Hmm.
you know.
You definitely wouldn't, and this has come up from, I think this has come up in a public comment, which is a good point, is that you wouldn't want to see cookie cutter homes, like 5 of one type of
Mhm.
home in that development. Sometimes developers, they have 2 or 3 homes that they can build very well, and they just give them as a menu option. And then like in Amador right now, I think they've built like 10 Prestons. And so then you just have the same home that's repeating over and over down the street. And that's not the way the homes were built,
Mhm.
in the adjacent neighborhood. So I think you'd want to definitely avoid having one type of home built over and over
Yeah.
again.
I mean, I think as far as community character, one of the things that Ruffner stands out about is that the homes are unique. There's a variety of homes there, and it strikes me as the majority of the homes there are very well built, quality built. Any other discussions?
Yeah, and all of the homes on Ruffner have, a lot more area. Like they have their. I mean, this doesn't go with anything that's on Ruffner Road. So if you're trying to make this like Ruffner Road, this is not Ruffner Road. Ruffner Road has big open spaces between their homes. They have lots of old growth. They have each individual house has its own unique characteristic. It is considered, just an older, well-established neighborhood where this, lends itself to very cookie cutter, very not forward. But to me, it's not forward thinking.
Yeah, I just want to pull the string on that a little bit, Eleanor. So do you feel that average density is inappropriate for this area, or?
Yeah.
Or can average density be adapted for this particular area? Because, you talk about open space, and where I struggle with this is you could have a average density development with very quality open space, which would be
this
real
is not that.
Okay.
This is not quality open space. You're considering the golf course to be your quality open space, I guess. I don't. This just doesn't.
Okay.
It doesn't. It is not what you would. Yeah. I mean. Anyways, I mean, not to. I've been in homes that have been built recently, and I have been in homes that are this quality. I mean, and there's the molding, the care, it speaks to the character is what makes this street the street.
Just again, so you're not saying per se that an average density would necessarily be incompatible with this area if it was presented in a different light, or are you saying that average density?
I would say that this is not good use. This is not average density to me. I mean, this is
Okay.
But
Laura, could you put the text?
Oh, yes, I can. Do you want the questions or the development?
So I think
The questions for me.
so. I think the question is the scale, right?
I mean, the scale fits obviously the bylaws of those.
Yeah, but you're talking about characters. So
So
what
the
you're saying
character
is
to me
there's too much,
is-
there's too much there. Is that?
Yeah, and the driveways are just offset, they're straight, the houses, it just,
Do you feel it's too cluttered and constrained?
compared to Ruffner Road, absolutely. There's no doubt about it. I mean, it's not even in the same ballpark. If you're talking about character, not even in the same ballpark. Not even close.
And would there be a way to mitigate that in your mind? I'm not asking you to redesign it, but what, off the top of your head?
Less lots.
Clearly less lots. I mean, you can see, yeah.
I don't mean to pick on you. Ellen.
It's okay.
I'm
It's
trying to
okay.
get clarity here. That's all.
I mean, if you ask someone that, the people on Ruffner Road, when they put up their shades, they're not looking into their neighbor's bathroom.
Okay.
They're not, the houses are, structured that way. And, I understand. I mean, my brother lives in California and the houses are like this close, but they turn them ever so slightly. So maybe if you're in your bathroom,
Mhm.
but this does not, characteristically, this does not fit Ruffner Road.
Okay.
If that's what you're asking. Yes.
Okay.
That is what
Does
I
anybody else want? Oh, Chelsea, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I feel like maybe less of the townhomes would make a difference. It truly does not fit the character of Ruffner, but I am a big advocate for adding, more opportunity for people to live in Niskayuna. So I feel like, maybe in this question, for the purpose of just answering it, the character, it's not the same, but perhaps it could be adjusted a little bit just to either make less townhomes or more space between them that could make it more suitable for the neighborhood. So just wanted to add that.
So if we were to say that it's the number and layout of the homes that's the concern, it's not the average density per se?
I feel like she's saying that this is not meeting the intent of the average
Yeah.
development, in which case this proposal specifically, the open space isn't meeting the intent of the,
Yes.
I think it would be hard to go further and say that you could come with a proposal that would work or not. I just think that might be unfair.
No, I'm not saying,
I understand what you're saying.
what I was trying to do is I was trying to get clarity between whether the open space, this particular development was incompatible or was average density in general incompatible with that area. Because I think there's a nuance there. Because one, and maybe it's not even capable on this parcel. I'm just,
Trying to
I think
I'm trying to
the thing
figure
is
that out.
too, like if you see these houses on Ruffner, a lot of the houses on Ruffner are ranch houses, so they look really big in the rendering. Whereas these are 2-story, I'm assuming, houses, right? 2-story townhomes. So maybe that's why they look so small compared to the houses on Ruffner. Anyway.
Laura, could I just chime in for a second?
Yeah.
Could you go back to the R1 drawing and just to make sure that we're all on the same page with what we're doing? So to me, in my mind, there are almost two things. Do people feel comfortable with the project in general, which they may or may not feel it's comfortable, the development of that 14 acres of land? And then if you go back to the R1 drawing, the purpose of the requirement of doing this R1 drawing is to show how many R1 zoning code compliant lots could be placed on that 14-acre parcel of land. So this drawing is showing that 22 R1 lots could fit in that land. So that's kind of like the baseline that they have you do that. So you look at the size of the lots, the spacing, and then the average density development is a technique for R1 and RR zoning districts to reduce the size of the lots that the homes are located on and take that banked, so to speak, land and redistribute it somewhere as open space. So my question is, as we're reviewing the special use permit, which is required for an average density development project, which is what we're showing now, are we just reviewing average density versus all single family R1 project? Or are they also evaluating the comfort level with the project in general, the development of the 14 acres of land?
Yeah, well, I think there's multiple layers to this, Clark, and I think that's where we're sort of struggling with it. If I look at the developments of the average density, I mean, the lots vary in size. Some of them are like 0.38 acres. For the single family, it's like 0.41. So that's sort of a wash in a sense. I think you have a lot of houses here. That's the concern.
Yeah, 0.41, that's so small.
Well, but that's what the zoning is. I mean, 0.4 of an acre.
So I feel like in the interest of time, because
Yeah,
we still have a couple more, and I don't want to push it, but I do feel like you guys are kind of going in a direction. My recommendation would be that I can summarize your points of concern. You could do a motion and a second, and then you could discuss any ways that you would suggest mitigation or change in the points that you feel are moderate to large impact.
What I'd like to do is let's just settle this one question.
Okay.
And then I was planning on going
To the same exact thing.
to the same.
Sorry.
extent. So I just want to make sure everybody is heard and represented on this.
So, Chairman Strafe, so are you saying that you would prefer an R1 development as opposed to an ADD, average density development?
No, actually, my view on this is I think an average density development is generally preferable. However, this one isn't. Okay, and the point I was just making is though, I would have problems with the density of the single family development as well. Because there's still, in my mind, there's still the impact. It's not, I don't have necessarily if you have a couple of townhouses integrated into the neighborhood, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing if you have an open space and it's done right. I just think the density here is more than I think fits the character of the neighborhood.
Okay.
And maybe that's what we're dancing around as a committee.
That was well said. I think that's exactly what's happening here.
Okay.
Lola, I have a question. So in terms of the level of the land, how does that area looks like? So what's the level difference between the proposed parcel and the existing houses on the
Sure,
Ratner
so-
Road?
There are some contours. They don't extend incredibly far into the existing homes. But like, for instance, this is the 470 contour. I think they're 2 foot. So this is 468, 466. It gets down to 460 over here. So this over here, this 474. So generally, like, this is kind of the highest area, 474. And then it's sloping towards the golf course down, so sort of north and west.
Okay.
It's sloping kind of at a cross
Okay.
going down.
So it's not like those existing houses are located lower than the proposed parcel.
So, like, if you were to look at, oops, you know what? Let me use the average density development one though. If you were to look at, like, say, lot 5 over here, which is at 470, this lot over here is at like 470. Yeah, so they're really, this lot here is at 470. So, like, this lot is sort of the same elevation as lot 5.
Okay.
These ones are going to be lower, but as you go We don't have the
No.
full contours because the contours haven't really been put, but generally speaking, it's kind of a gradual drop off into the golf course going to the northwest, I'd say.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So just to recap on 18. So it will, the density of the proposed action is not in character with the neighborhood. And it's really a density issue from what I hear. And then the second issue I heard was that this is an average density development, but because of the density of the development, it doesn't achieve the goals of an average density development
Yeah, I wrote down the quality of the open space.
based on the quality of the open space. Yeah.
I concur. I previously mentioned my concern about the buffer, and you guys have also captured that point. The quality of the open space is not consistent with the average density development.
Yeah. And then finally, if we go up to A, I think there is some risk that if the whole golf course may go at some point without, again, I think this gets down to what I'd like to see is a long-range plan so we don't lose this asset by a series of small developments. I personally think that the golf course is a big asset to the community, and I'd like to see it be in the community for forever. No. Yeah.
Oh,
I heard
true.
that. Yeah.
I think that's material fact.
Yeah.
Yeah, what Bill is saying is that the planning board asked the applicant to consider if they would be willing to put the town of Niskuna to give the town of Niskuna the ability of right of first refusal. So if the rest of the golf course was to go up for sale, the town of Niskuna would have the ability to buy it before anyone else.
Yeah, that is certainly a good thing, but I just, from my perspective, that's not going to protect the asset. Because it assumes the town has the money to do it in hand. And how does that protect against a development like this? Does every time a parcel come up for sale, does the town get a chance to buy it? And would it make sense?
I guess you'd have to look at the way the right of first refusal was written. Yeah.
I mean, because technically, and would it even make sense for the town to do it that way, right? I mean, you take the current parcel, the current 14 acres, right? I mean, suppose the developer came back and said, okay, the town of Niskuna, you can buy the parcel for what I would make developing it. Would the town really do that? Probably not.
Well,
Because,
there is a funding opportunity called the community, what is it? The community forest program, right?
yeah, I guess the point I'm making though, Ashok, is that the parcel on a totality is what's valuable.
Okay.
One could break that parcel up and do it. It doesn't alleviate my concern of losing the golf course piecemeal by piecemeal. Where if we had a full plan on this, we could potentially say, okay, this area is going to be developed, this area is going to be developed, and the rest is going to be preserved.
That's a very fair point.
So I think my last comment is this, is that the 14 acres prior to this development, one of the things that, is very important to the CAC is, are obviously trees and green space and the wildlife and keeping all of those things intact. And, these homes or townhouses that will be put in is going to take away that green space. It's going to put in more asphalt. It's going to, these, homeowners will be using pesticides, all of these things that, the CAC is trying to prevent to being used, to better our community and our climate. So it just makes me sad, I guess, and concerned.
I take Ellen's point and the chairman's point that that there is a risk of like this being the first of many dominoes in eliminating a treasured town resource in its entirety.
Okay, go ahead. Did you want to say something?
You want to say something?
Nope.
Vic? You turn. Oh, okay.
Okay, so I think we've answered that question.
Okay.
So would we like to take a vote on this? Or okay, and so I can make the motion, and I would say that given our discussion tonight and previous discussions, I would recommend that we give this project a positive deck. There are a lot of issues that I think need to be worked out. And I think the positive deck would make that particular point.
I second the chairman's motion.
I agree.
I second.
Okay, shall we take a vote? Okay, all those in favor of a positive deck, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries unanimously. Okay, so with a positive deck, though, we need to be very specific. We're asking the developer to do some additional work before this project can move forward. So I think in all fairness to the developer, we need to be specific about our concerns.
Sure.
Okay.
And then, so just to reiterate, a positive deck means that we're recommending an environmental impact statement, which would, if our recommendation is adopted, require the developer to review the alternatives, review reasonable alternatives to the action, and identify ways to reduce or avoid the adverse environmental impacts. So we feel that, or through your motion, you're indicating that those areas that you have marked as moderate to large impact need to be studied for alternatives and ways to mitigate the environmental impacts there.
Yeah. And what I would do, though, is I might, in my view, I might reposition that and put that a long-range plan for the golf club has to be worked out in conjunction
your
with the town.
I would say I would add to chairman's point and say a long-range plan for the golf course that is that at least considers the adopted comprehensive plan and recommendations therein.
I'll just add that if there were to be a development on the golf course, I would rather see the parts of the golf course that don't have forests developed for housing and not displace the biodiversity that we have. And I think our town is as developed as it needs to be. But if it has to go forward, because it is a private, property, I would rather see that the golf course be disrupted as opposed to the forest. That's how I feel about it.
I think we have to be a little careful here. Like the golf course is their means of income, so I don't feel comfortable saying that.
Well, that's not your opinion. That's mine.
Yeah,
We don't need to agree.
I think this really comes down to is, this, in my mind, this parcel has been discussed in at least multiple plans. And I really think that if this were to develop, you know, you would probably get 300 homes on this piece of property if it were to develop. And that would be a tremendous impact to everything: schools, sewers, water, open space, traffic. I mean, it would be essentially a disaster. And I personally understand why the golf course might want to develop some of its property, and I'm open for that, but I just don't think that this is the appropriate development. And then I think that gets down to the scale, the character, and all that stuff.
So can I just, so has it been determined that there will be a wetland study of that area? Or has it been,
Yeah, the developer represented at the planning board meeting that because where the road was going was changing, that they would have to do a new wetland delineation.
okay.
Mhm.
Just a question, like, given that the town is like really in the midst of a natural resources inventory, could we at least petition the developer for access to survey the flora and fauna in their property?
I mean,
To
yeah,
bring
we
it under
could
the-
add it
That
as
could
a
be, that could
recommendation.
be part of it, is to
Yeah,
be part of the natural resource inventory.
yeah. I mean, it is private land, so they have every right to refuse, but I'd at least like to ask their permission to go in and see what nature there is.
Well,
And-
I think we would want to have Jim
Yeah, Nick, not me, a trained naturalist. Yeah.
progress with that, yeah.
Kind of on that note, though, I do think it would be nice for us to take advantage and look at this area as well. I know a couple of the people who spoke tonight in the beginning said that we would be welcome to do that, and I would love to take that opportunity if anyone would like to join, just to kind of get our own kind of look as well.
I can schedule a site visit. You are putting forward a recommendation.
No, yeah, I would say that I think we would have to see where we go with this.
Yeah, so
recommendation.
if the proposal is, adopted and moves forward from the town board back to the planning board, we could schedule a site visit because you would look at the environmental review for the subdivision.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah, that sounds good.
yeah,
Okay, so based on the preliminary findings that were in your packet, I touched all of them except for the home because that was mitigated by the developer. We could put a note there that
Mhm.
mitigation was done. The questions, the impacts identified were essentially the same as what we identified at the last meeting. And then the positive declaration recommendation was made. The ways I heard that they would like to give direction to the developer was the density is too high. They would like to see the density reduced. This parcel is discussed in the comprehensive plan and the concern about the piecemeal development. So they're asking for a long range plan so that we don't lose the asset. The golf course is a very important piece of the town that we want to develop responsibly or protect. And then revisit open space to make it more usable and conduct a survey, ask if we could do a natural resource inventory on the property.
Yeah, could the golf course be brought under the natural resource inventory at no cost to them?
Yeah.
The cost will be borne by us.
Did you want to add anything else?
To the extent possible, I would say, like, craft the language. I think the language is already good, but craft the language, maybe like polish it a little bit so that we make it clear that this is not an adversarial process. We want to work with the developer to meet their goals, and we are sympathetic to their needs, and this should not be taken as the beginnings of an adversarial relationship.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Mhm.
Laura, what I would ask is that you send this out to us
Draft.
and we could
Yep.
get back to it.
Can do that.
And so in that is our concerns from before about the fires, all of, or does that, or do we have to wait?
No, I actually, I mean, I think one of the reasons that we took 2 meetings to make our recommendation was that we outlined most of our concerns at the last meeting, which
Yeah.
I put in the packet so you'd be able to see them.
Right.
So the only ones that I wanted to make sure remain the same because there was changes to the plans were the ones that we just worked so long on, the 17 and the 18. And, but I left the majority of those findings the same unless you wanted me to change them.
Yeah, the,
I think they were there. Okay.
I think one thing, long-range plan for that area, there are probably elements that we would want to know, like areas where potential development could occur and elements that where it would be, golf course or conservation areas.
Okay.
Particularly, yeah.
And I just want to be sure that, the part about the fire emergency vehicles is in there, because I didn't think that we had mentioned that in our previous findings.
Yep. So that was in the question number 17. I'll make a note that I add that in there.
Thank you.
Laura, I think in some respects, the way I see this cast is we want the golf course for the town of Niskayuna, and we want just to really ensure that it's an asset for the future.
And we would work with them for
Yeah.
them to be financially viable and sustainable.
Okay. I wrote that down. And Bill's here and he's hearing it.
Okay.
I'm kind of wiped. I don't think I can go through the.
You have to.
Okay. All right.
Sorry.
Can I take a bathroom
You eat
break?
your orange?
Yeah.
Okay.
Why don't we take a 5-minute recess and stretch our legs?
The State Street one is going to the town board, so that one has to have a recommendation.
Totally fine.
Yeah. No, the grant one is also going to the town board. This one,
Yep.
Nick and Greg, please do not stop the recording. We're just pausing for a moment. Yeah, you're not stopping it, right? Okay, good.
God, I got to teach lab tomorrow. I have a 3-hour lab in the morning.
I'm just going to use the bathroom then.
Why?
Yeah, 3 boys in a row. 34, 32, 25. Yeah, I think the first career, I was just, the first financial. I had the first 2. I had a little, our office reorganized and we closed it, so, I'm doing, I did a South Carolina or. Forever. And he was gonna stay there. And I was gonna do South Carolina, they were going at the time. And he said, we did it very good part. And so there's a big vacation left it, but they gave me a 7. I had 2 more kids. Well, I knew you wanted more, but it was like it's exciting about 10 and so I, that was.
All right, let's sit down and get to work here, peeps.
I'm so glad I had dinner before getting
So I have a meeting at 8 o'clock tomorrow. This isn't bad. No, everybody here is good. I'm just saying. It's gonna be.
Want to start with the easy one?
It's up to you guys.
This is the easy one.
The town, I think, right?
The grants.
The grant. Let's start.
Okay, we're going to reconvene part 2. And let me just pull up my docket here. Wrong docket. Okay, let's move to the third EAF.
Whoops.
I'm still scrolling. Okay.
Okay, so this
EAF 2023-05, Town of Niskayuna Parks Improvement. It's a grant application. So, Laura, do you want to explain?
Yeah, so this is a grant application for improvements to 4 of our parks. This is the overview map. The 4 parks that the grant is looking at are River Road Park, Fieldstone Trails, Fieldstone sort of a natural park, Avon Crest Park, and Lions Park. The grant is proposing in Avon Crest Park to basically just resurface this parking lot and then stripe some parking that goes along the back sides of this lot here. Because people right now just park there anyway in the grass. And the pavement is in pretty poor condition. So that's basically just a repaving and restriping project. The aerial didn't come out as good on this map as I wanted it to, but essentially the area in blue is natural forest. A lot of it's wetland. And it was dedicated to the town when the planned unit development for Fieldstone Estates was put in. And at the time, the developer developed these trails, the trails that you can see here. And it's been quite a few years now, and the trails, they need to be rehabbed. There's quite a bit of boardwalk, and the steps up to the boardwalk are difficult.
Missing.
Yeah, are missing. And so they want to make those so that it's not such a heavy lift to get onto the boardwalk and just upgrade those trails. They need some maintenance. And at Lions Park, there's an existing deck around the Lions Park train station. It's a historic building. It's on the Natural Historic Register. It has a deck right now that's in pretty poor condition, and the building is not handicap accessible. There's a pretty significant step to get into the building. So we have an architect who is kind of thoroughly trained in historic renovations. He did the Emily Dickinson home in Vermont, and he's been working on resurfacing the deck so that it's safe. The deck is in some places kind of high and facing the river, so it needs to be safe. And then also creating handicapped accessibility. One of the things he's talking about is kind of putting the wood in front of the handicap ramps so that you can't really see the metal as much. So this one doesn't have that, but that's, I think, where we're leaning. So it'll just look like the deck keeps wrapping around the Lions Park building. And those are his deck plans. is a picture, and you can kind of see the disrepair of the deck. So the idea would be to repair that deck and bring the decking out so that this step could be navigated by people who wanted to access the historic building. And just because Jim had this and I love it, this is a picture of what it looked like when it was the train station. So if you've never seen that before, that's how it looked when it was a train station. And the last thing that they want to do is River Road Park. You can kind of see from this aerial, must have been taken when they were in the middle of rebuilding the softball fields. There's a couple of different iterations of improvements, and during the first round of improvements to this park, we poured a concrete pad that would fit a pavilion. Didn't have enough money to put the pavilion up. And then we also spec'd in the next sheet I'll show you, extending the parking lot so people would be able to access the pavilion. And so this proposal is to follow up on those plans, put a pavilion over top of the existing concrete pad, add an additional parking. And then one of the things that was identified sort of after this plan was that right now there's kind of horseshoe type of recreation things there that nobody uses and they're falling apart. And so the idea was to make a separate area with a pavilion and a inclusive playground for people with all needs, so that people could come to Niskuna and have an inclusive playground that was ADA accessible. So they are proposing to put that just to the south of Pavilion. That would be what the pavilion would probably look like, very similar to this. And the inclusive playground, this is the proposal for the inclusive playground. It includes a whirl that is ADA accessible, a spinning cozy cocoon, and kind of more of your typical playground there. So that's what it would look like if it was built. And the part one is there. If you have any more questions, I'm happy to answer them, or we could work on the part.
I just have one clarification. So the train station, because it's a historic structure, there's a review process by SHPO.
Oh, yes, I did include the letter from
Yep.
SHPO. They reviewed it and determined no significant impact to the historic structure. That's right.
I just wanted to make that point. So,
So I have I have a couple of things that I just wanted to ask. So one, when we looked through these projects, did we assess all the all the other town or parks? I mean, do we have like a checklist of, so we picked these 4 because they're next on the list to need improvement. And do we have a list like that? So, or did we just create, I guess, how were these picked?
Yeah, I would say it's not like a formal list that you'd be able to like find in a comprehensive plan.
Okay.
But I do think that these were picked because they are at the top of the town's list for rehabilitation. We've been receiving comments from the public for a while now about the trails in Fieldstone Park and the condition of the pavement in Avon Crest. And I think having an inclusive playground was a priority for the new supervisor, but the improvements to the River Road Park were really attempted 2 years ago, but just the cost at the time just escalated so high but having a concrete pad with no pavilion on it, it needs a pavilion.
Okay, and then I guess my question is that the pavement that's going to be put in, is there a way to make it like
porous,
so
not
that
the right soils,
so that we can not? Yes, no.
Nope. River Road Park has really clay soils. It's not even close.
And as well as
Avon Crest.
Avon Crest.
That's just a resurfacing. The project wouldn't include digging up and putting out. You would have that would be a totally different lift and cost actually, because you would have to dig out the existing pavement
Right.
and then
Okay.
check the existing soils in order to put down a different type of pavement.
Okay. I was just wondering.
Yeah, but it's always good to explore all the alternatives. But there would this grant wouldn't be able to cover that.
No, that's understandable. And then so and this so there is already a playground at River Road.
Yes,
This
it's
is just another one that makes it ADA.
ADA. It's inclusive. Yeah, so it has a couple of different features that are helpful to different types of disabilities.
Right.
Yes, the current playground at River Road Park, I think, is restricted as far as age goes. It's meant to be a younger type of playground. This one doesn't have that restriction, and it has the inclusive types of equipment.
Okay. And no other trees or anything need to be taken down in order to.
On here,
It didn't. Really,
we planted a couple of little baby trees that aren't doing very well that we may lose. But you can see that this is essentially just grass. This is all grass. There's a couple of bare root trees that we did as an experiment that we planted along here. If they can be moved, I will have the highway department move them. They're small enough that you could move them, but some of them are actually dead. So, but there's no large trees that are being taken down.
Okay. And the parking and paving
Expansion.
So the parking and paving expansion, the top one is because the softball feel like they need more parking up there? That we couldn't just do gravel?
I think I think during softball times, there's a lot of parking on the grass, which is not ideal. But I also think the other reason they did this is actually so that this park has kind of a separation. And then if somebody wanted to enjoy this park kind of during a softball game, that there would be a separate place where you could go. And also the town they do things like they rent pavilions so that if you were going to use this space, it would be, I think they wanted to extend the parking lot towards the pavilion so it would be a usable space and it would be more accessible. If you're putting the inclusive playground and a pavilion there, it needs to be relatively close to the parking so that people can use it.
Okay, so I guess my only comment is that I wish that was going to be gravel up there.
Gravel instead of asphalt?
Yes.
I second Ellen's comment, like gravel instead of asphalt, less invasive.
It makes it hard for to put an ADA and not have I understand why you're putting it in, but if there was a way to, I know that there's a second loop from underneath
down here.
Yeah, to be able to get, but it is difficult if there's something else going on at the park, but there are parking spaces for that as well.
Yeah, so is the gravel suggestion because you feel it's less impervious than asphalt?
Yes. That's it.
I'll put it.
Okay.
Okay, can we do the form?
Oh, yes, sorry.
You don't want to have a debate? It's okay. Just kidding.
Alrighty. Can someone do me a favor and really jump in quickly on their recommendations for the form? I am uncomfortable doing recommendations because it is a town project.
Yeah, we can jump in.
Okay. It's a short form, right?
It's the short form.
You have it up? Go ahead.
Okay. So I don't mind. Or do you want to read the questions? Or can you?
Read the question.
You can do the whole thing? Okay, I'm ready.
Okay. Does the proposed action only involve the legislative adoption of a plan, local law, ordinance, administrative rule, or regulation? Am I in the correct form, Laura?
Yeah, it's a short environment.
Yeah, it's just a short form. Yeah.
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 Yep. Page 94. Yep.
Yeah. So, so the question one proposed, does the proposed action involve only the legislative adoption of a plan, local law, ordinance, administrative rule, or regulation?
No.
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 So question number two, does the proposed action require a permit, approval, or funding from any other government agency? I believe we already have
Yes.
funding, right?
Yes.
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 Where are you?
And then that's
Yep.
the grant from Assemblyman Stuck, right?
What are you
Question,
reading?
I shook.
what?
Which one are you reading?
The short environmental assessment.
That's
form.
part one.
You need to read part
Yeah.
two.
I'll read the questions. You
Yeah,
can answer
go
them,
ahead,
okay?
Laura, read the questions.
Okay. Will the proposed action create a material conflict with an adopted land use plan or zoning regulation?
No.
No.
Will the proposed action result in a change in the use or intensity of use of land?
No.
No.
Will the proposed action impair the character or quality of the existing community?
No.
No.
Will the proposed action have an impact on the environmental characteristics that cause the establishment of a critical environmental area?
No.
It's not in a C.
No.
Yeah. Will the proposed action result in an adverse change in the existing level of traffic or the existing infrastructure for mass transit, biking, or walkway?
None.
No.
Will the proposed action cause an increase in the use of energy, or does it fail to incorporate reasonable available energy conservation or renewable energy opportunities?
No.
Will the proposed action impact existing public-private water or public-private wastewater?
No.
No.
Will the proposed action impair the character or quality of important historic, archaeological, architectural, or aesthetic resources?
Well, it's.
I don't think so.
You got
Hmm.
you.
You got the approval
Yeah,
from.
it's say-
Approval.
Yeah, like no to
Yeah, that's
small,
what
make
the
sure
SHPO
you're
would be the
protecting
only
the,
thing.
make sure you're protecting the
Yeah.
historic quality of the building. Yeah.
Yep.
No to small, protect
Okay, so we're through the questions?
No.
We're not.
Protect historic quality.
have one
I'm
more.
writing it down. Hold on. Of building. Okay. 9 is, will the proposed action result in an adverse change to natural resources, wetlands, water bodies, groundwater, air quality, flora, and fauna?
No.
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 And then, will the proposed, and 10 is, will the proposed action result in an increase for potential for erosion, flooding, or drainage?
No.
You could
No.
put no to small on here and then ask for the gravel to be explored.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Okay.
No to small.
Thank you.
Explore gravel. And then will the proposed action create a hazard to environmental resources or human health?
None.
No.
Okay, and then do we want to do our normal request for pesticide?
So does
free?
someone want to make
Yeah.
a motion?
I make a motion that this project be given a negative declaration.
Second?
What else goes with this one for pesticide free? LED lights,
Well-
you're gonna use them.
Yep.
Yeah.
Low mo. Is this a low mo situation or not with the softball field?
I know, that's what I was just thinking. Is there
Yeah.
an area that they could-
Have you ever played
I mean,
softball at a low?
it's an opportunity. Should we see if
I'm
there's
over
an
there.
area that
Oh,
they could
yes.
offset the
Oh,
parking
yes,
lot
yes,
with
yes.
Lomo?
Yes, it's an opportunity. We should definitely take every opportunity.
Like the
Yes,
outskirts, the
yes.
outskirts.
Okay,
Where it
so we'll
makes
ask
sense.
for offset of impervious with Lomo.
Yeah. Not in the softball field.
Yeah, right. No,
Okay.
that would not work out.
That would be interesting.
With Lomo. Okay, I got it all.
Okay. So,
Thank you.
Who made the motion in the second?
I made the motion, Chairman
didn't-
made the second.
okay, all in favor, say aye.
I
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Wow, that was good. By the
For
way,
the
this,
short forms are way easier.
yeah, this fieldstone really needed the repair. I was involved in an initial project, and you talk about like, I forget whether this was an average density or PUD, but if you look at the green on this, see how much was set aside. It was substantial. When they first put the boardwalks in, I walked on it. It was beautiful. And this fall I went,
Yeah.
and it was miserable.
Yeah.
I'm really glad to see the town's doing that. All right, let's go to State Street,
Yep.
Okay.
That's the first one.
where we started.
Thank you for taking them out of order. I think it was useful for the people who were in the room for
Yeah,
us
no,
to-
that was a good suggestion. So this is 39 State Street, EAF 2023-01. And this is the Kia
12.
dealership.
And it really hasn't changed too much since you guys saw it, but I did want to highlight a couple changes. They are keeping the Norway spruce, which is that very large tree that we received public comment on, that there was birds of prey and nesting in it, and potentially even an eagle. There was a bald eagle that flew over me when I was on the site here. So State Street. So they are saving that tree. There's a couple of Norway maples around it that they would take down, and they're saying that there's some vines and things that are choking out the tree. So essentially, they'd clear everything around that tree to keep it, to help it continue to have a good living space and be viable and healthy. And that's right here.
So does that meet the criteria for the tree council? I mean, because they're about to, pave over the roots. I mean, that tree has long roots. So does that meet the tree council's? I mean, because those other trees that are near that and that are quote unquote being choked out by vines, I mean, they could get rid of those vines.
They could. Yeah, they could. Yeah, no, there's no question. The tree council's recommendation was to save that tree. And the usual recommendation, although I think it should be greater, is to put the fence around the drip line of the tree. So it's not going to, I mean, it's certainly going to damage the tree a little bit to have the area paved over. Yeah, it's not going to be super great for the tree, but
Can we put that as a recommendation?
to leave as much area around the tree as possible.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it's not a porous pavement either, is it?
I think we asked them that, and it's not.
Yeah.
Because it's draining to these two stormwater management areas. Yeah. It's really hard to do porous pavement in Niskayuna. You can do it, I think, all day of the week in Saratoga, but not in Niskayuna.
I understand, but I can still.
It'd be nice if we could do it.
No, am I getting confused? Like, did this involve the demolition of a house?
Oh, yes. Well, it's the same as what you guys saw before. So it's actually two homes.
Yes.
This home and this home. These are let me zoom in a little bit here.
I'm still a little uncomfortable about the precedent of of home demolitions. It makes me a little uncomfortable.
Yeah.
No,
it's
I mean,
definitely a negative. Can I just finish with the changes
Go
and
ahead.
then you
Yeah,
guys
yeah,
can,
go ahead.
yeah, sorry. Okay. So, so just as a quick recap, these are the three parcels. They're currently single family homes. There's currently a vacant wooded lot where they would remove the majority of the trees, but keep the spruce. The changes from the last time are that they're keeping the spruce. And then the other thing that they did add is that currently, if you drive down State Street, this area here it's all asphalt and it's constantly got cars parked in it. They're proposing to take that asphalt up and make it a green area and put some trees and landscaping there. And they also created these little islands of green with trees to try and keep the parking, because right now the parking kind of bleeds into the road. Oops. And see how my computer does that? It's so weird. And they also added, they pushed some of the asphalt out, and they're proposing to add this long evergreen buffer to buffer this home from the lights and activity that's in this property here. They added street trees and a sidewalk so that you could walk off street as you're getting close to State Street. Complete Streets wanted the sidewalk to go all the way to Albany Street, but that wasn't feasible for this project. And the only other thing, which I haven't reached out to the applicant, but I think that they are willing to do, is potentially they can add a little more green space right here. This is all asphalt, and they could potentially add some green space to make that kind of consistent with the upgrades to the rest of the corridor. The concerns, you probably saw them, the planning board noted, is taking down the single family homes for commercial.
Do they own that property right there?
Right here?
It's
in the town right away, so they would be allowed to make improvements. I also reached out to the property owner to see if they would be amenable to that, and they were.
Okay.
It's to their benefit because they keep people from driving onto that asphalt where their children play.
Okay.
Well, you mentioned landscaping on those other islands. I would definitely put in a recommendation for, pesticide-free wildflower meadow kind of landscaping and not some kind of lawn that has a lot of pesticides with non-native flowers and things like that. But my primary concern is still the two homes. That I am uncomfortable about that.
Do we want to go through the questions?
Yeah. Let's go through.
Wait, sorry. Leave more space around tree. Oh, okay. And then more natural plantings, pesticide free. I'm just making notes.
But that area of Niskayuna, like near State Street, right? That character is quite different from what anyone normally thinks of Niskayuna. And when we're talking about green space and wooded areas being a premium, it's definitely more so there than almost anywhere else in Niskayuna.
There's a lot of open space between these two homes.
Yeah.
It is zoned commercial highway. And the only other thing, which is just kind of a recap, is that currently there's a problem with 18-wheelers dropping cars off, and they kind of stop in this turn lane, or they stop along the residential side streets. And so the planning board required for them to make a path and a drop-off area for the cars so that they could require that all 18-wheelers pull onto the site and don't disrupt the residential neighborhoods while they're dropping off the vehicles. I guess right now the 18-wheeler can't get on site because of the turning radiuses of the property. So let me just, here's their part one.
How did it
Get approved that way? It's probably pre-existing non-conforming.
An 18-wheeler.
With it when
That's like a standard car.
yeah, when
area?
when the new cars come.
Yeah.
When the new cars come that they're selling is a problem.
So the other thing I just wanted to ask is that in that area where they're going to take down the two homes and they're going to put up this parking lot here, I don't see any indication of any lights. Is that correct?
They're trying to make the lights extremely minimal because that was one of the big concerns of the planning board. But
lights are lights. So
there's one here. Do you see this? There's security and safety lighting. There's one light pole here, and there's one light pole here, and then there's one right at the entrance. I think there's 3 total. Which they said they needed for the safety of staff walking to their cars at night and things like that. So it wouldn't be a completely dark parking lot. But they were saying low.
So this is not going to be used to park the new cars in?
Yeah. I think that my understanding is that they have a lot of inventory that they keep off site and they move it to this site. And so this would be for inventory, but it wouldn't be like their main sales lot. I think they would still keep the main sales lot would be out front where they can advertise all of their cars. But it essentially cars that they would sell would be parked here, just more not with all the pizzazz. It's like their inventory parking, not like their sales parking.
So, is it feasible to make those motion censored?
I don't know. We could ask.
Because just even any light makes a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no reason why any employee couldn't park in the closer.
Yeah. So, that would definitely work for safety. I guess for security, maybe that still works. I don't know.
They can use cameras.
Yeah.
Just like, they don't need to have lights for cameras.
For cameras.
Okay.
Yeah, but there is minimal lighting in the parking lot proposed. So I wrote down motion censored. Okay. So the impact on land, the proposed action may involve construction on or physical alteration of the land surface of the proposed site. I think the answer to that is probably yes.
Yes.
Um, the proposed action may result in increased erosion, whether from physical disturbance or vegetative removal. That's probably an impact that we would want to call out. I think the other ones are like they're not removing 1,000 tons of material or anything like
No,
that.
but the-
Yeah. Impact on geological features. The proposed action may result in the modification or destruction of or inhibit access to any unique or unusual landforms on the site, i.e. cliffs, dunes, minerals, fossils, or caves.
None.
Nope. Impacts on surface water. The proposed action may affect one or more wetlands or other surface water bodies, streams, rivers, ponds, or lakes.
Are there any wetlands, ponds on that side?
No.
Not on the
No.
site, but it will drain to the Woodlawn wetland area.
Is it, that's
So-
why they have
So
that
a
on
couple
there.
of the smaller questions within that are the proposed action may create a new water body, dredging more than 100 cubic yards, result in an increase or decrease of over 10% or more than 10 acres in the surface area of any body of water. So that's definitely a no.
No, the question though is like, you're gonna have all these cars on this impervious area and the water table's really high there, right? I mean, these roads are, part of the reason it hasn't been developed, some of these roads is because it's too wet. I think the applicant said that he couldn't use underwater, he didn't know if he could use underwater storage because it would be under the water table potentially.
He did say that.
Yeah, because we asked him if he was why he couldn't build a garage.
Yep.
Okay. So that might fall under other for that question.
Yeah,
Just
I
looking,
mean,
it doesn't actually really, I don't think, trigger any of the.
Yeah.
But under other, we could state the concerns about. Actually, though, that's probably falls under impact on groundwater. That's the
Okay,
next
yeah,
question.
then-
Yeah.
I think we should leave that one as a no
Yep,
because it's
okay.
really not an open water body.
Right.
Yep,
Okay.
no, I agree.
So number 4 is the impact on groundwater. Proposed action may result in new or additional use of groundwater or may have the potential to introduce contaminants to groundwater and aquifer.
Yeah.
And so
And wetlands, I mean,
I don't think it triggers any of the higher ones, but there on the other impact, I
Yep,
think you
no,
could put the high groundwater was
Yep.
a little concerning. And then number 5, impact on flooding. The proposed action may result in the development of land subject to flooding. These are not in the floodplain, so that's no. Impacts on air. The proposed action may include a state regulated air emission source. It is not the case
No.
for this. Impact on plants and animals. The proposed action may result in a loss of flora or fauna. I think we usually say yes to that.
Yeah, yes.
Generally speaking.
Yeah.
It doesn't, I don't think it triggers any of the big ones here. It even the Mohawk Golf Course triggered one of these questions. I don't think this one will because
No.
it's too small. But I think on other,
Isn't that an important species or something like that, the bald eagle?
so the sub questions to the flora and fauna, one of them's threatened or endangered species. I don't actually know if the bald eagle is still listed as it's not anymore, right?
Check that.
Yeah, so the first 2 questions have to do with threatened or endangered species. The second one is for a species of special concern as listed by New York State or federal government. The 4th one is also a species of special concern. So none of those I don't think are triggered. The 5th one is the proposed action may diminish capacity of a registered national natural landmark. Nope. The proposed action may result in the removal of or ground disturbance of any designated significant natural community. I also don't think you have that.
No.
The proposed action may substantially interfere with nesting, breeding, foraging, or overwintering habitat for predominant species that occupy or use that project area.
It would be minimal. I mean,
that may come into play with the spruce tree, but they are trying to save it.
yeah,
And then it's not converting more than 10 acres, which is what the Mohawk
Yeah.
Golf Club triggered. And then because the long form is meant for very high impact. That's why these questions, we require the long form for special use permit, but these questions are meant, I think, for a larger project, which is why you really have to kind of dive into the other. So here, I think the other impacts would be like the loss of the open space between the homes and the, you know, the trees that would be removed.
Is that the only, are we done with that? Or is there other questions?
That's all of the sub questions to that question.
Okay.
Just the bald eagle is not an endangered or threatened.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think you could say there's an impact to the flora and fauna just by them being removed.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
open space, yeah.
Yeah. But it's going to fall under other. And then impact on agricultural resources. No. Impact on aesthetic resources. The land use of the proposed action are obviously different from or in sharp contrast to current land use patterns. The planning board did discuss this a little bit. The proposed use is consistent with the adjacent commercial lot, but disharmonious with the surrounding residential homes.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe this is the one or not, but the developer has acknowledged that this is not due to, there's no customers at this lot. This lot
Correct.
doesn't even fit his requirements. And he actually needs a bigger lot. And this is being driven because he's potentially going to lose a lease on an existing lot. on
And Morris. Correct. Yeah, Morris.
And
Potentially.
potentially. And my view on this is that this is going to be really impactful to a community that has more affordable housing in the town of Niskayuna, where, you know, there's not too many affordable homes. And, you know, that it's interesting that, you know, we can have a discussion about Ruffner Road and the impact to the community character, and yet here it's just as substantial in my opinion. I actually think this is an equity issue, and that this is not a good use, even though it's commercial. I understand that. I just think we should not be building up this area of town with big parking lots.
So I actually think that still falls under 17 or 18, and I'll tell you why.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I?
No, that's okay. I mean, I think it's good to say, but the aesthetic resources are generally federal, state, or scenic or aesthetic
we can
resources, scenic views. So I think that discussion is very specific to the one we just had, which is more to 17 and 18. Because there isn't really an aesthetic resource in that corridor.
No,
I would
agree
probably
with that,
skip
yep.
that one. I would say no to that one. Impact on historic and archaeological resources, that's a no. So impact to open space and recreation. I mean, I think there is some impact to the open space there between the homes. It's quite a bit of open space for that area.
Yeah, I would put, there is an impact.
Yep. Impact on critical environmental areas, none. Impact on transportation. I think adding the sidewalk is actually a positive impact on transportation there.
And the trucks
Oh, and
making
getting the trucks off the road. So
Mhm.
probably positive impacts on transportation there.
Mhm.
Make those notes. Impact on energy, pretty low. Impact on noise, odor, and light. That could be where we put that.
It could be high.
I know one of your original concerns was that the asphalt might make the ambient air temperature a little warmer. Yeah. And then we could also put the question about if they could mitigate that with the light, with the motion sensors for the lights.
Still, I mean, low light never means low light.
Yeah.
I mean, low light is the CVS, but that's not low light.
No.
Yeah. And then impact on human health. That's probably a no. This is more like whether or not there's pollutants on site.
Well, I think I think at the very least, if you were going to do that, though, the stormwater would have to be appropriately treated,
Yeah.
whatever that appropriate.
In those
26.
stormwater ponds, yeah, they
In those
usually are.
stormwater
Yeah.
ponds, yeah.
Yep. Then 17, I think, is where it goes into what you were just discussing. So the question is the proposed action consistent with adopted land use plans? And it, sort of comes to, it's not going to be triggering that 5% or be in sharp contrast to surrounding land use patterns, because it's adjacent and the zoning allows it. But I think where you probably want to dive into is the local land use plans and maybe may induce secondary development impacts. And then again, 18, consistency with community character.
I think that goes to community character, what I said.
There's the specific question actually is, does it displace affordable or low income housing in an area where there is a shortage of such housing?
Yeah.
What is known about the quality and livability of those two houses? I mean, they're like total wrecks.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
that's not the two houses they're taking down isn't really the impact. The impact is having a huge parking lot in the middle of a residential area. I mean, if someone came and said, hey, I was going to take down the house and build a small scale law office or something, that would be a completely different story, right? Because that would be allowable use, that would be compatible. But I mean, from my perspective, you're putting in a big parking lot.
I can see that point.
Yes. One thing to think about, though, is I really have been stressing with the planning board the concern. Like right now, there's only 2 homes that are adjacent to the commercial property. And if you were to do this proposal, you would make, I think, 8 homes adjacent to a commercial property. So I do think that that's impactful because you're kind of expanding that commercial boundary out. The one thing that was brought up at the planning board, which I don't think was discussed like at length, it was just a point that was made that for you guys to think about, is that this is a special use permit, so it has this higher level of review, but it is zoned commercial highway. So you could have someone come in and buy those 2 homes and as a right put something like a McDonald's in or something. So even I personally also struggle with taking down the homes for a parking lot. I don't like it at all. And I don't like expanding the commercial zone like out into where it's pushing up against residential homes, like much more than it currently is now. But I was talking to the county today and they said, make sure that you are weighing that with what isn't allowable as of right there, just to make sure that you're weighing that. Is their suggestion.
What is the number one thing that is preventing people, especially people who require affordable housing that can give them a door into Niskayuna school districts, right? What is the number one thing preventing such people from taking those houses right now?
So point of they're not in the Niskayuna school district, but
Oh.
they're in South Colony, which is still a good school district. I mean, it's still a
Okay.
good school district.
Well,
but
I
it's
didn't know
not-
we had property in Niskayuna boundary that is.
Oh, lots.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
we have lots. Yeah.
Okay.
And the Niskayuna
Well,
school
South
district
Colony School District is
is still a very good
yeah,
school
still a very good
Yeah,
school
it's still a
district.
very
Okay, so my original question is like, what is preventing people from, using the home for its intended use as a home?
I mean, I discouraged the planning board from doing a walkthrough because we obviously can't evaluate but the applicant has represented that the homes are not in great shape. The one that's directly adjacent to the property, I think, has been vacant for some time. The one that's farther away from the commercial property is currently occupied. There is someone who's living there. So, obviously that home is livable. But
So they're going to be bought out.
Yeah, I mean, both
Well, assuming they
owners
own the house.
are
Okay.
saying that we'd be happy to sell you that property and
Mhm.
yeah, but I think the applicant has represented that especially the home that's directly adjacent to the property is in poor condition and would require a decent amount of rehab.
But what about the houses that are going to butt this commercial property?
As far as I know, they're all fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the home that is, adjacent that is not being occupied right now is not up for sale. There is not a for sale sign. It is not
So
on the
that
market to be
home,
to be sold.
that home actually had a pre-existing deal with Fusillo that when, if the property was ever going to go up for sale, that they would kind of have a first right of refusal. So I don't think there's a for sale sign because the person who was the most interested in purchasing it had some kind of a agreement there.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think, not having a crystal ball, it's possible that if for some reason Matthews Kia was denied, possibly that land would go up for sale. But it's not up for sale now because it definitely had some kind of a pre-existing agreement with Fusillo
Okay.
for the expansion. Because I think this expansion idea dates back to before even Matthews Kia. That's what they've represented to us anyway.
Okay. Thank you. So have we mitigated all of our points on 17 and 18?
Well,
I'm just looking at the zoning for highway commercial. It might help if I'm on the right one though.
I do think that we have to be very careful about any type of taking down of single family homes. But I do also want to balance the improvements that they're proposing to the corridor and the potential for something worse to go there.
Well,
My initial, gut reaction is we've got to protect those single family homes because
Mhm.
once they start falling, more would potentially
Yeah, it
go.
sets
Because
a
once you
precedent.
start pushing that commercial boundary out, now it's against. First, it was against 2 homes. Now it's against 8 homes.
well, that'll be used the next time we
Correct.
Yeah.
have this.
But you do want to make sure that you're considering, I think, kind of the whole, I'm always glad that I don't vote for the
Well,
record.
I mean, what could possibly be worse than from a CSP perspective than a massive parking lot?
Well, I mean, so it was a question that came up in my office this morning. Like, you could fit 2 drive-through restaurants there. The zoning would allow, it's their 15,000 square feet. So, I mean, a parking lot is a quiet neighbor
Mm-hmm.
and obviously much less impactful than some of the things that would be allowed as of right in a commercial highway zoning district. Those aren't being proposed to us, but we do want to be careful of what, is allowable in our zoning district.
Okay.
I just, so where that's situated, although they could be used for those, those are for 15,000 square feet for a drive-through of some sort. That's not a good area for them. They already exist right up the road. They've used every single one except for perhaps a Burger King.
Mhm.
So, and that isn't the kind of land that Burger King is looking to purchase on a side road.
Well, we have a lot of discussion about the Route 7 corridor, and then if you take a drive to the airport, there's a stark difference where Niskayuna ends and Colony begins,
Mhm.
right? Bam, you see a whole bunch of commercial development, and rewind the clock 30 years, right? A lot of that new commercial development used to be colony homes. And I'm just with those kind of topics in the background, I'm really concerned about setting that precedent of removing residential and putting commercial in its place.
Yeah, I do think that's fair. And we had quite a discussion on the comprehensive plan at the planning board. One of the things that's in the comprehensive plan is a specific item about not allowing the commercial to consume the adjacent residential neighborhood.
Mhm.
But also understanding that we want to promote, sustainable, lively commercial on State Street because it's one of the only commercial areas that we have. So there's a balance in the comprehensive plan of trying to keep and diversify the commercial areas on State Street without negatively
Yeah.
impacting the adjacent residents.
Yeah, I would be, I understand your point, What if a dermatologist wants to move in, or a dentist, or somebody like that? That would be, like, for me, much preferable than a massive parking lot. And you are right, like, that's one part of town where we do have space for commercial and almost, and I'm guessing this is guesswork, and we could get relatively less resistance to commercial development in that part of town because of the major highway through it.
Yeah, I would argue that you actually don't notice any difference
Yeah.
driving from Colony into Niskayuna on
Yeah,
State
on State Street. Yeah, so we
You
won't get
don't
much
even notice
difference.
when you hit Schenectady. Like, there's really no difference along the State Street.
Yeah, and then, like, bam, there's this massive parking lot that, like, I'm not.
But there's
comfortable.
houses. I mean, there's R2 adjacent to this. So could you put up the,
Zoning map
not that I have the zoning map here. Could you put the developers
proposal up.
proposal up?
Yeah.
Because I just want to see.
Get there.
So are the homes on the other side of it, are they on the other side of this, are they in that zone too?
Well, you see, that's what I'm looking at. And the zone, looking at the zoning map, right? There's South Fagan, and then there's South Amherst, but there's a kink. And
The zoning line actually
The
goes
zoning
right
li-
through the back of this. Do you see this residential home right here?
is that where that is? I'm
Can you see
trying
my
to-
cursor? The zoning line goes right through the back of this home. So this home has some commercial highway on it and some R2. This one right
So
here.
as far as that lot's concerned, though, that's an R2 lot, right? Because we always take the
More
less-
stringent.
yeah,
More stringent.
more stringent. So that's an R2 right there.
Well, typically that would have, if there was any touching of the R2, that would be the controlling zone. If they could keep it entirely out of the R2, though, they usually can keep the.
Okay.
But they're not proposing anything on this house, but just to give you a sense of where the zoning line is, it cuts this parcel. So these homes here are in the commercial highway district, and like these homes over here are not.
Mhm. So all the houses that abut this property, they're all in commercial.
Or split commercial residential.
Well, it looks like it goes to Albany, right? So the street above it is,
South Amherst.
that's South Amherst, where?
Yeah, this
This one
street
here is
here is
South
South Amherst.
Okay. All right, so it splits it all the way up there, right?
Yeah.
But South Fagan is a much busier street than Amherst.
Yeah, no, the point is so if you go in there, right, you can take the houses out, follow that line up there, right? You're going to take all the houses out in the next block. And then the next block, it goes all the way to Albany Street. I mean, there's a huge swath of residential in that area. And I think that's where I'm sort of like having an issue with the parking lot here.
Not to mention you isolate those two homes too.
Yeah.
You can't make a recommendation
Well, the problem too that I'm having, right, and you could put another, McDonald's could go there, right? But we have a developer that wants to put a lot that's going to be substantially impactful to a residential neighborhood, and the lot doesn't fit his needs, and it doesn't necessarily have to be co-located with his business. So that's very different than him saying this is essential for my business and I can't survive as a business. So that's a want. It's not a need, in my view, based on what the developer has currently told us. So if I want to build a parking lot, then the neighbors have to suffer with the parking lot.
Laura, are we through the questions at this
Mhm.
point?
So I guess the question is just so that I have some clarity. I think I'll double check, but I think we said yes to the flora and fauna, a positive on the traffic, and then we had notes on the noise, odor, and light. And we also had the note on the groundwater for the drainage. But 17 and 18, it sounded to me like you wanted to say yes, that the action is not consistent. Well, I don't really know. How are we landing on if the action is not consistent with adopted land use plans?
How big is the buffer in the parking lot between the back of those houses and the parking space?
It's got, I'm just gonna estimate. It's probably at least 30 feet. Maybe even, it's probably about 30 feet. So the width of those parking spaces is usually 9 to 10 feet. Or it's 9. So like 9, 18, a little bit less than 30 feet.
So typically, if you're in an R1 housing development, the sidelines have to be 20 feet. So 40 feet is the distance between two houses in a R zone minimum. That's not a lot of space.
They did start out with 144 parking spaces, and they're down to like 97, and they increased their buffers significantly from when we first saw. The planning board mentioned this, and I do want to mention it as well. I think the applicant has tried harder than a lot of applicants that I've seen to mitigate some of the problems with this proposal. But I really do share the concern of taking down the homes and expanding the residential. I mean, the commercial. But even the concession of keeping the Norway spruce, like,
There's a lot of other trees they're taking down.
they're planting far more than they're taking down, though.
But they're old growth.
It's true. They're really the three, and then yes, they are taking down a significant amount of bigger trees.
Okay.
Laura, like if you know if the CAC goes towards a positive deck on this one, like like unlike the Mohawk Golf Club, there's really nothing we can say regarding specific actions they can do to mitigate, other than like don't put a parking lot in there, like
Well, not entirely true. Because if they're looking at alternatives, I still think they could actually look at an alternative of not taking down two homes.
Okay.
I think there would be quite a difference in this proposal between 1 and 2.
I think if they put parking on the other side, if they took a row of that parking out, reduced that back line, I think that would make a difference.
Oh, as far as like just the area here that's labeled 22 parking spaces?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would have to say I feel much more comfortable with, I would prefer no homes, but I would feel better with that one home that is currently not being occupied, as opposed to the second home that is being occupied.
I am with Ellen on that. Like, if one home is not occupied and if it is in substantial need of repair and it is sitting behind a car dealership on a commercially zoned region, I'd be comfortable with that, rather than like setting a precedent of like getting rid of an occupied home at this point. All right. May I make a recommendation?
But I would prefer that the car dealership seek already paved areas that are close to them, and I would pushback on the number of actual car spots that are needed.
Based on the concerns regarding the concerns that the chairman brought up and nicely summarized about the change in character of the neighborhood, the substantial loss of green space in an area that already has precious little, the demolition of 2 homes, one of which is perfectly livable and indeed being lived in at this point. Based on those factors, I propose that this project be given a positive declaration.
I would second that. So we can put it up for vote.
All those in favor?
Well,
So
wait,
I just wanted to
Ellen
make
wants to say
sure
something.
that
Mm.
Chelsea didn't have anything to say.
Oh no, you guys, you definitely kind of caught the gist. I mean, I love the idea of having this commercial ability in Niskayuna, and I think it's super important to promote it. But from a real estate standpoint, there is no inventory in this market right now. So if we could get another single family home on the market available to people to be able to, you know, live in it, which clearly it is, then I advocate for that. So I'm with you guys.
Okay, so
Ellen has
Thank
a point.
you.
No, I just wanted to make sure that,
Chelsea
I
can-
know.
okay.
You guys are awesome.
Okay.
Thank you.
okay, so let's
Mm.
call it to a vote. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 All opposed?
Vicky, did you? You said it. Okay.
Deferring to the majority on this one. I don't have strong feelings. I
So-
haven't visited or.
Okay.
The motion passed. Motion passed.
And regarding the specific changes for the developer, definitely consider demolishing only one house. Consider eliminating the last row of parking spaces that the chairman recommended, and especially given the fact that this is not even 100% suiting their needs, you know, look for something that does 100% suit their needs.
Find another parking lot.
And
Agreed.
I also just want to say, so Vicky said she was deferring, so I think that the record should show that she was, you know, I just want to make sure that she would.
I feel like
You can't defer.
I feel
Yeah,
like
You can't. You have to
You
vote.
can abstain is what I meant.
You can't abstain without a reason for abstaining. It
okay.
can't be I don't have strong feelings either way. You have
Yeah.
to choose. You're
I haven't
appointed to choose.
studied it. I've
Yeah.
only heard about it here, so I haven't gone and visited. I don't feel like I have all of the information I would like to have. So
You have to vote on with the
what I
information
know.
that you have.
Okay,
before
I'll
you.
vote. I'll vote with the majority on the negative declaration then.
Positive.
I'm sorry, the positive declaration. Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry to be mean about that, but we've gotten
That's
some
okay.
pretty clear guidance on abstaining.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I propose, if we can, given the late hour,
Yeah.
to basically punt on all the additional business that
Yeah,
we would
the
normally
discussion
discuss for the next
items.
meeting.
Laura, any speculation on how long the next meeting? Because I do have stuff to add on the Bethlehem stuff. I would like to have some
Yeah,
discussion.
because both these projects, well, all three of these projects were acted on, and I don't know of an EAF
Okay.
coming for the next meeting. I would expect it to be much shorter.
Yeah, I request that even if there are no agenda items, we still meet
Yeah,
in
to
order
talk
to
about our- yeah.
to talk about
Yep.
the discussion
Good
items.
point.
Yeah.
All right, I make a
Mm.
motion that we adjourn for this evening, and I thank everybody for the discussion.
I gratefully second that motion.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Bye.
Who wants to stay? Okay, thank you.